o'clock, so I was looking at that one. So it's 6 o'clock. Good evening.
We check with your satellite, so you know we're rocking out.
What I'd like to do is just give you a couple little housekeeping things, and then get on with the presentations and the discussions. Next week, we'll make one more improvement in this horseshoe. We'll move these people out of here in some fashion so we can get all of this inside the post. Sorry about the post, but there's a lot of ways to look at the material. A couple little housekeeping things. You have a number of things and something to add to your workbook. Tab with all of the discussion items that you will see tonight, plus I thought it was on. My mic is on, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
It's on. So tonight we're going to have presentations that are slightly different, but I think that was on the web page and the information, a little bit different, so that we continue with the overall picture before we get specifically into departments. I think we said public safety last time. Change that to give you more of that overall perspective with city clerk, finance, human resources, information technology, and legal. Most of these are going to be 10 minutes, but the human resource one is longer. It's a very large area of influence, and it's something you've asked a number of questions about. So bear with that. It's good information. It's abbreviated to the degree that it can be, but it's still going to be a little bit longer, probably closer to 45 minutes. And also I would ask this evening, if you hold questions to the end of the presentation, many of them might be answered in the presentation, but hold on to them, and then we'll do Q&A after each and every presentation, if that's okay with you. You have the meeting minutes that in your book, and also posted, and it would be we will seek approval of those shortly. Now, I'd like to start with how we've addressed questions from the previous meeting. For those of you who looked and didn't see things posted, I take responsibility for that. In the interest of making it perfect, I think it's delayed a little bit longer than we wanted to. We're now on a day-to-day basis. We've got the system set up that works. Everything's on there, including the video and just a volume of information. But the thing I would like to draw your attention to, and be happy to correct if we haven't addressed the things that you've inquired about, is sort of a close notes and follow-ups that has the initial report on the website, on your website, the CBC, and it has the initial report. We will simply add to that as we get new information to answer your questions or new data that we'd like to share with you. So that's just going to be a cumulative amount of information, all of it again focused on giving you what you need for your committee to succeed. But anything you see there that is problematic or that you'd like to question, or that we missed something that you asked and somehow it fell through the cracks, I apologize, but please just let us know. We'll see that it's on there. Staff is putting a tremendous amount of effort into gathering that information, that factual information, and getting it back to you in a way that's easy to read, where you don't have to go through volumes and volumes. So again, ask if you'd like more, please. Now, we have, does everybody get one of these things that looks like a calculator, but isn't?
No.
Okay. Oops. These are not gifts. These are actually a little system called Turning Point.
I can sure. Oh, I sure can.
Thank you very, very much. I'll click some of them.
Okay.
It's called Turning Point. And they are a simple tool to allow us to vote, if you will. Now, these aren't voting on policy items. That's not what it's about. The voting on questions get brought up that are about your own internal governance. And so when those questions come up, rather than try to sort out a perspective, we have a very simple way. We're going to ask you, do you want to do that or do you not want to do that? And yes, we do. No, we don't. And we'll use this simple little tool. I don't know exactly, but someone here can probably tell us exactly what you push for yes and for no when the time comes to do that. Are there any left over?
Yes, there are quite a number here.
Thank you very much. And then what we have is a setup. So this is something that the city has in its training system, and it's very applicable here. And then we'll see it up on one of these screens. We'll see what the yes and no votes are. And that's the way we'll go. And I think it's a very simple, very direct way to do this. And there was one question that I thought might be a good one. There are some questions that you posed that we'll address at the end of this evening as part of your open dialogue and as governance questions. So we'll address those using this same tool. But one question that came up specifically, and one that we want to discuss now, just so we can understand your interest and then prepare for next week, to post if necessary, is do you want commentary from the public? Now, in the past, at last week's discussion, one of the things we looked at was not having public's welcome, and there's many ways to interconnect with the public, but the position was we don't want it during the committee meeting given the limitations of time. But there are also pros to that, to hear the voice of the people as you do your thinking and go through your conversations. So it's certainly one of those questions that's up to you. I mean, this is your body, and it's up to you to make that decision. Now, I need some help with how to do this. I don't know how.
You mean the voting?
Are you ready to do
Yes,
it?
we are. I didn't see you back there. I'm sorry. And
I
so
understand.
what we're going to. So let's yes. Yeah.
Dick, are you going to like qualify that as in saying that would there be response from the public for a half an hour or?
Well, I think yes, but here's the way I would suggest it. You can do this a different way if you like. First question is, do you want it or do you not
Okay.
want it? The second question is, how long do you want it for? Do you want it to be unlimited? Yes, no. Half hour? Yes, no. 15 minutes? Yes, no. It's up to you to form those parameters. Is that okay? Anybody have any other questions about that? So the basic question is, would you like to have within the structure of your committee input from the public? Is the first question, and how does one go about that?
Okay, and I'm making the next slide also when we ask about time frame. Do you want me to do 5, 10, 15-minute increments, or how do you want me to do
I
it?
think probably 10 minutes. 5's a little narrow, but
And the question on the table is, do we want public input at every meeting? Is that right?
well, I think we should start. We want public input at all at the meetings, and then I guess another good question, Howard, would be: do you want it at every meeting or just periodically? So if we start with that basic one, do you want it at all at these meetings? I think that might be. Is that a fair place to start? And what is the interest?
1 for yes, 2 for no.
I'm not pressing. 19 total.
So we should see up here.
So you can press 1 for yes?
I'm sorry, let's do it again. I messed up already. Up here, you will see that we only have 11 responses. If you have already pressed your response, go ahead and press it again now. It won't double count it. I just want to make sure that we have 19 showing up here since we have 19 people with responders.
My light doesn't show that I'm pushing anything.
I tested them all beforehand and they all work.
1 for yes, 2 for no.
Everybody who's already voted, make sure you press your response again because this should show that we have 19 people responding. Oh, except that it says it's closed, so you guys are wondering what's wrong with it. See when I switch the slides.
Now, do it again. Bingo.
So we have 58% of people saying yes.
42% say no. So we have public input by your vote. Now, do you want that? And I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this. Do you want that at every meeting?
Is that how you want to do it?
Yes. Please, but every meeting is question. Go ahead. Think you can go ahead? Okay.
Missing 3.
Missing 2. Missing 1. Did we get it? Everybody press again. Somebody's not pressing quite hard enough. There you go. Now we have everybody. Okay. Okay, so we'll have public input not at every meeting. Pardon me?
Can I see the results again?
%68 said no, 32% said yes. Would you like it at every other meeting? Go ahead. Who missing? Okay, so we have commentary, public input every other meeting. That starts next week. We'll do that one 2 weeks after, and so on. Yes, sir.
We limit the public meeting, the public comments to, just like city council, 3 minutes and a total time limit of 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, let's start with 15 minutes, since that's been suggested. We'll have 2 questions there, okay? The first is, do you want 15 minutes as a specific time? Yes or no?
Can we have options?
Yes, we can have options. If you think it should be more, then vote no, and we'll say 25.
Oh, I just didn't know if she could up there do options with 15, 20, 25.
Because I told them to wait for me to put it. I've got 15, 20, and 30 minutes so far, so we can do multiple options.
Okay, go good. Good.
So 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25. How do you
Well, let's go in 10-minute segments.
Is that the total? public?
Yeah, that's what I want to clarify. Is that the total?
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Yes.
This is the total amount of time that'll be permitted, however many you can get to speak in that period of time, with potentially a time limit, but that'll be up to you also. So the total time you'll take out of your meeting for that. So this is a 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's correct. We'll make that 15 minutes. Okay. Now, understand, this will be a call to the public, and it's not a conversation with them. So they get to make their commentaries, but it doesn't weigh into the. It's not a back and forth. Okay, so they'll have that time to make the presentation. Now, length of time. I think that's the last piece to this puzzle. Starting with 3 minutes. Why don't we say 3, 5, 7? Does anybody want it to be more than 7?
No, but I would like it less than 3. So 2 minutes.
Okay.
You
Why don't
know.
we say 2, 4, 6, 8? Okay. And see where you
Kind of like the prime number grouping there.
Because more people would get a chance to
But
talk.
again, remember that this is strictly their commentary. For the record, you'll know what they have to say, but we won't use it as a point of discussion. It has to be posted completely different. It's more problematic otherwise. Go ahead. Two more. Well, that's pretty. So we will begin next week, 15-minute call to the public at the beginning of the meeting, I assume. Is that, well, we can do this perhaps without that formal voting, but are you talking about the beginning of the meeting? Tell me if you're not. It's a long time for people.
I would say the end of the meeting.
You'd rather see it at the end of the meeting?
I mean, they're going to sit here and listen to what we're doing, and I was thinking that was where the comments would come from.
But yeah, these comments are okay. Let's try beginning or end. Is there a
Or
problem?
break. Don't we break? So at the end of our break, when we come back from break immediately, at least they would have watched the first half.
It's, okay, let's say beginning, middle, end.
Okay?
Now, one of the things I just encourage you to just think about is when are you going to maximize the likelihood of getting commentary? Since that's what you want, is there a point at which in any one of
Because
those
then we
you
could
think you're
address
most
it.
likely to get the commentary? So beginning, middle, or end? Go ahead, folks. 1, 2, or 3. Beginning it is. So our conclusion is the public will be invited to participate beginning of the meeting at 2 minutes apiece. I'll keep a clock, or we'll keep a clock somewhere to do that properly. We'll limit it to 15 minutes, and it's simply their commentary, no discussion. We'll ensue that.
Does that mean that the 8th person only gets 1 minute?
Yes, sir. Or negotiate with the 7th person for a minute and a half each. Thank you. That's a pretty good way to do these little things, because we're going to have a lot of them that come along. I think no one knows who's got what. It just ends up being a very simple vote. Ethics Policy Acknowledgement Agreement. I assume that you've now read the ethics agreement and have signed yours. So if you wouldn't mind passing them, say, around this way, or is it to the end? Pass it down to the end, and I will collect those.
Something
If
else.
there's anybody missing those, please take the time to sign that tonight before you leave.
Isn't the front of the jacket?
Oh, yeah, I think that's turn it in. Do you have another signature copy, or I may have turned mine in last week?
I have that from last week.
One of you needs it?
I got one. There we go.
Does anyone else need one?
I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, the minutes. For the record, the minutes need to be approved or amended. So I think in the more traditional fashion, if someone would make a motion one way or the other, or
I move to approve the minutes.
can move.
I second it.
We have a second. Anybody have any comments? Please. The motion, Mr. Fairby made the motion, and it was seconded by Ms. Nelson. Anybody have any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. So the housekeeping is pretty much done. Now, I would want to draw your attention to the website. I've spent a fair amount of time on that website. There's a bundle of information there. Some are looking for where are the organization charts, all 13 of them, or you pick them up right off the homepage for the CBC. They're not in the pull down. They're right up there. There's a link to them. If you see anything that's missing in there, there's just a ton of stuff in there. It's fun to just surf through it and see how much goes together for this discussion. Look at it almost on a daily basis. There'll be add-ons because a couple of the items that you ask about are still under review, and the information to follow. Look at that. We'll be adding stuff on a day-to-day basis so we don't have the same delays. And again, I own that problem. It's my fault in trying to be just a little bit too precise about it. So the next thing is, and at the end of the session today, we will have the use of those instruments again with several other questions that are posed in the areas that you might want to pose at the time. So general government presentations are going to start with human resources. Then we're going to go to finance, legal, information tech and city clerk. This, sorry folks, this is probably going to be the longest night you'll experience from this point out in terms of presentation, because it is this overarching set of information that you've been so interested in. Tempted to get this as brief as we can, but it's going to take a little time. Thank you for your patience. Hold your questions to the end of each separate item, but please feel free to ask questions. Now, is the presentation in here? It's in the material that was handed out. So if you pop that into your book, you can see the HR tab, and you'll see a tab on one of these that has the presentation. I think they'll switch it over for you, and it should be here momentarily. We're setting that up in the control room. There we go. Bingo.
Human resources get to be first. They always say they save the best to last, so I don't know what that means.
Try to get rid of that. There you go. And then you can either do this, which is usually a little bit easier, I think. Left, right.
Okay, got it now. All right, our first thing is to talk about who we are. My name is Kay Wilkinson, and I'm the Human Resources Director for the city. I've had the privilege of having this position for the last 10 years. Prior to that, I was at Longview, Texas, which is in East Texas, city a little bit larger than Goodyear, 80,000 or so. And you might detect some southern accent. I think after 10 years it should be gone. But I was in a position when I left there as a deputy city manager, similar to here. Municipal court and the library and HR and risk management were my areas. And I do have my master's degree in public administration. And as you all think about human resources, I'm sure everybody has had experiences with human resource department in their past. Yes? Yes? Good experiences, I hope? If not, think of the best customer service experience you've had, and that is our mission, to provide that type of service to our employees day in and day out. Tonight, as Dick told you, we're going to be a little bit different. We're going to talk about what our department does, but Jeannie Reddy is also going to be talking to you about our compensation plan, because we think we'll have a lot of interest in that. And Dean Kokenauer will be talking to you about our health care program and also covering a little bit about risk management. And then we'll answer any questions that you might have. Now, this is a chart that you will see from every department, and so I wanted to explain what the red and the yellow mean. Red positions were frozen last year. Yellow positions have been frozen this year or eliminated. In addition, we had 2 temporary positions of 20 hours each that were administrative in nature, and those have been eliminated. So we lost about 33% of our staff over the last year and a half. And we also acquired a position. We acquired the volunteer coordinator position when a department was dissolved. When you think of HR, you think of recruitments, and boy, have we had fun with recruitments. If you look at our numbers over the years, when you get to 2007 and 2008, 210 recruitments for a city our size. Those are just for full-time positions. So we were really hopping. When we got down to 2008, 2009, and the growth was declining, we still had 92 recruitments, and we had the ballpark open, so we had 83 additional temporary positions that we put on board. We're also responsible for the classification system. We maintain 220 job descriptions, and that doesn't mean they just stay in a book. As growth happens and everything changes so rapidly, those are updated constantly. And we are always reclassifying or classifying positions during the high growth. Even last year in 2008, 2009, we classified 20 positions due to redeployments, organizations, reductions in forces, and the ballpark being added on. Employee relations is something that we do and take great pride in. We believe that if people are treated fairly and consistently, they will enjoy their work and they will be more productive and happy. We also want to make sure all of our legal requirements are met. And we do that through policy development. You can see the numbers, lots of changes all the time. So as legal things change or things change within the city, we're constantly revising. We also do policy interpretation. That's both for the employees and for the supervisors. And we provide guidance to the employees and the supervisors. And hopefully we provide things that make our place a better place to work. You all have been supervisors in the past. I have a brief quote from Peter Drucker, and I love this, that supervisors spend more time on managing people and making people decisions than on anything else. No other decisions are so long-lasting in their consequence or so difficult to unmake. So we take a lot of pride and take a lot of care in taking care of our employees. We currently serve 514 employees. You see that's a drop of 13.3%. As the city manager told you last week, we lost 79 positions so far. That's as of December 28th. Every position that leaves is looked at carefully to see if that position should be open and advertised or if that position can remain frozen. We also administer our pay for performance plan. That in 2007, 2008, that meant we reviewed about 700 reviews and kept track of the timeliness and the evaluation ratings. We did over 5,000 data entries into the payroll system. That doesn't include the new hires, that's just changes. And we compile all sorts of statistical record keeping. We answer or send out over 330 surveys a year. So we want to know what other cities are doing in Maricopa County and in Arizona. They want to know what we're doing. So it's a constant filtering of information, gathering of information. And I told you we took on the volunteer program. I think I counted there were 19 people here voting. Hopefully we have 19 more volunteers that we can add to our volunteer staff as soon as you all finish this assignment. Our volunteers currently are in 10 city departments, and they also work on city-sponsored projects. And you can see in 2008, 2009, 516 volunteers donated 12,633 hours of their time to the city. Just absolutely remarkable. And the lady who was in charge of your voting and clicking, that used to be our employee development manager. And as you saw in the chart, we have 3 divisions: employee development, human resources, and HR. Our employee development manager has been reassigned, redeployed to the city, to the mayor's office, and she serves as his assistant. And so I wanted to just hit on her department briefly, just so you know, back in our heyday, back in 2008, 2009, she coordinated or taught 131 classes and had 1,878 participants. Now, we have 2 required classes that our employees need to take, ethics and harassment, and she developed some computer database training classes so that they can do that at their desk and take it at their leisure. We miss our Sandra very much. The fiscal impacts to the department, of course, the main thing is losing staff. Of course, that's 33% of our staffing has declined. We lost our employee development manager, we lost our safety and compliance specialist, a staff assistant, and a temporary administrative assistant, and a student intern position. We also added a new volunteer program, which was called Adopt a Park, to help out our city. And I think the parks appreciate that all 12 parks have been adopted by citizen groups, and so that helps them with maintenance. And we've added programs through the stimulus funds. Anytime we can find anything that's free or very low cost, we try for that. So Maricopa County Workforce Connection, we brought in 11 students this past summer who worked 2,240 hours at no cost to the city. And we also have a VISTA program. I think you all have probably all read about that. That's the Volunteers in Service to America. We have 4 people working in that program right now, and they will be here for a year. I zipped through that very quickly. Do you all have any questions before I turn over the program to Jeannie Ruddy, who's going to talk to you about compensation? Yes, ma'am.
Joan Shield, I was wondering how many people, how many vacancies did the city have that you did not replace or rehire? Because that's not really a cut. That's, you just didn't fill those positions.
We have 79 positions total that we have lost. 27 of those at the time that the position was eliminated actually had people in them, so 27 people were laid off. All the other positions had employees in them. When the employees left, a decision was made not to fill those positions.
So 52 positions you did not rehire for, right?
Right, and we had the 27 layoffs.
Right.
Okay. Gary Gelser, could you talk about turnover on a yearly basis? How many, what your percentage of turnover has been over the last 2 or 3 years as a result of the economic times, or is that somebody going to cover that in the future?
We weren't going to, but I can give you not quite accurate numbers. We like to do 13 point such and such and such and such to give you exact. 13 point something in 07, 08, and this year we're about at 7%. Vicki, nod if that's about right. 7%. That Vicki Lackey, and Vicki is our analyst in HR who does all those 330 surveys every year. Gary, would you like to have a breakdown over the last, say, 4 years or 5 years? 5 years?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I have 2 goals tonight, and one is to provide you an overview of our compensation plan process. And my second goal is to be able to answer any questions that you may have about our compensation process. First of all, our compensation plan is our most important element of our human resources programs. Basically, it's the foundation of all of our other programs. For example, it's the foundation of our recruitment and our retention plan. We need to have an effective compensation plan to be able to recruit. Just having the proper questions and having a good recruitment process would not be effective if your compensation program wasn't able to attract quality people. Same with retaining the employees that we currently have. Our performance management program, it is also the foundation of that, in that our performance management program is a pay-for-performance program. So the employee's performance rating on their performance review is directly related to their merit increase that they receive each year. Then it's also the foundation of our workforce planning, succession planning, and also our resource allocation. It also helps us to ensure internal equity and external competitiveness. So how does an effective compensation plan benefit our city? Well, it allows us to attract high-performing individuals. It helps us to ensure that we can do our best to retain quality employees and not have to recruit over and over again, and them going to other cities, because as we know, there's all these surrounding cities, and they're also under the Arizona State Retirement Program, so it makes them easy to switch, and it doesn't affect their retirement plan. Of course, also it helps us to compete with other cities and other employers to be able to attract those same candidate pool. It helps us to effectively and efficiently manage our financial resources. Of course, when we do our compensation surveys, we definitely don't want to be paying too little, and we don't want to pay too much. We want to make sure that we're comparable with the market. Our survey process, first it starts out each year, and we look at the positions that we've surveyed in the past year. We like to, for consistency, keep those same positions each year in the survey. However, sometimes positions are eliminated from the city, so it's not necessary to include those. Or sometimes we find when we've added a position, there's not matches in other cities, so it doesn't benefit us to keep a position in there that doesn't have a match. The positions that we do survey all of our sworn fire positions and police positions. We've selected 19 exempt positions and 10 non-exempt positions. In addition to surveying salaries, we also survey non-health care benefits, including paid leave, like vacation and sick, and also other types of compensation like assignment pay for PD or hazmat or paramedic pay for fire. Our survey is sent out each year in November, and we usually receive our results back after hounding certain cities by December, the first part of January. Here is a list here of our benchmark cities that we do survey. These cities were recommended by our compensation consultant and then reviewed and approved by the city council, and based on the criteria that you see there: commonality of positions, location, competition of jobs. Here's a sample of our survey data. When we get our results back from all of the cities that we survey, we compile it to one spreadsheet for each position. And here you'll see the survey job here is GIS technician. You'll see in the first column it shows the survey cities. Then they will put their job title in there, and then if there is no job title that matches, they'll put no match. Then the survey job number, that's just We survey 39 positions. That's just number 20. The number of employees, the number of incumbents in the position, then the minimum, midpoint, and maximum of the range, and then the average pay per job in the other cities. How we determine our market position is, you'll see circled there is the city of Goodyear's midpoint, and then we take the market average pay that's out in the market, and we come up with our market position. You'll see this position in our city compared to our market benchmark cities is 91% of the market. Our survey process, once we get the data back, we take the survey information, we combine it. We also review it for accuracy. We want to make sure that the matches are accurate, and of course, sometimes there can be typos in the numbers. So several times as we're scrubbing the data, we have to call the cities back to make sure the information is correct. We also, if the salary range is way out of whack with what we have, we go on their website, we look at the job description, and make sure that it is a match. When we send our survey out, we provide them with a summary of each position, the duties, any kind of certification requirements, educational requirements, and things like that, years of experience, so that we can make sure that the job is matched as accurately as possible. Once we analyze the data, we provide a recommendation to the city manager for a market adjustment or any changes to the pay structure. Here is a history of our market positions since July of 2001. If you see the two columns in red, those were the 2 years that we used a consultant. During those times, in the survey, they surveyed 90 positions. So, of course, the pool of positions was a lot larger. And at that point in time, they weren't there to determine really our market position, but really to start from scratch, to take our compensation plan, look at where the market was, and then implement our market position where we wanted it to be. So you will notice in July 2001, the council had approved a market position of 106%. As you go along, the columns that are in purple, you'll see that those columns were the years that we did our survey internally. Our market position when we did the survey in 2002 was 102.9%. To get to our 100% or 106% goal, we needed a 3.1% market adjustment, and so on. You'll see in July 2008 and coming up in July 2010, because of our budget constraints, we are unable to provide a market adjustment to employees to bring us to our market goal of 101%. So changes that we've had in our compensation plan over the last 2 fiscal years is in 2008-2009, our merit increases were suspended, and there were no market adjustment in 2009 of January. It was anticipated that council wanted to approve a 1% market adjustment, but due to budget constraints, that didn't happen. In 2009-2010, merit increases continued to be suspended, and no market adjustments, in which there was a loss of about 3.6%. Tuition reimbursement was suspended, and uniform allowance and no overtime for holiday, working on a holiday. And any questions? Yes?
Joan Shield, while we made these adjustments and so forth, you did pay retention bonuses.
Longevity pay?
Longevity
Is that what you're
pay,
referring
yes,
to?
right.
Yes. Not all employees got those. You have to be here for at least 5 full years by December 1st to receive the first increment, which is $100.
Well, I have a question about that, since we were laying off people and cutting hours and so forth, that we even paid longevity bonuses.
At that point in time, it's in policy. It's basically a policy decision of city manager.
It could not have been stopped or rolled back or anything done, nothing done with that. I'm just wondering if I was an employee that got laid off, I wouldn't be very happy if my coworker got a retention bonus or a longevity bonus when I had been, my hours had been cut back or I'd been laid off.
Gary Gilzer, could you tell us what the total amount in longevity bonuses was for the last fiscal year, please?
In fiscal year, this December 2009, it was $103,200.
Barry Hamp, the changes in compensation over the last couple of years, the next to last slide that you showed, are those changes consistent with the other market areas? I mean, the other towns, and I guess where I'm headed is, are we in danger of losing good employees to the nearby municipalities?
Well, if you look here on the chart, if you're at 100% of the market,
Kind of small. You have to help me out here.
sorry.
I agree.
Thank you.
That was my next
Even when you
question.
put it up there, it still looks kind of small. But if you're looking at July 2008, so the last red column, during that year, we implemented our plan at 100% of the market and gave an employees a 1% market adjustment at that time. You'll notice there was a big drop for the next year. Well, what happened in that year is still in 2008, 2009, of our 7 out of our 10 survey cities, they still gave merit increases. So you'll see, well, what's the difference if we were 100% of the market the year before and the next year we dropped way down? That's because 7 of those 10 cities were still giving merit increases to their employees in 2008.
And that was my question. So we are, I mean, if you're thinking about the communities being, equal in terms of salary, we are in danger of losing good employees, or we could be in danger of losing good employees because Goodyear has not done what other surrounding communities have done.
Right. We've started to cut back a lot sooner. And then you'll notice our survey data that we just received in January that will go into the market on July 2010. Into that, we'll be at 96.1%, 97.1. We've gone down just a little bit, and the reason for that is some of the cities who have unions, so their MOUs still required their police and fire to receive increases, so it dropped it some more. So even though they didn't do merit increases for their non-union employees, their union still had contracts.
Thank you.
Do you find that the other cities are also doing this survey?
We are completing surveys nonstop. That's one of Vicki's big jobs, and so we try to help each other out. We have different positions that we like to survey in different processes, but we are completing surveys to the same capacity that we have ours each year.
And have you done a cost estimate on what it costs to administer the survey? In personnel hours or in time in compiling or anything like that?
We have tried to, and did it in the past, where we had basically several cities that came together and they did a survey process, but it dwindled after about 2 or 3 years because they had their own needs and their own goals.
So a cooperative didn't work?
We tried it, and we were hoping it would work, and it did for a few years. Good question.
Marvin Fair, is the term longevity bonus the same as a retention bonus?
I wouldn't call it retention. Basically, I would consider longevity pay somewhat of a thank you for your years of service at the city. In addition, for those who, and that's why it starts at 5 years. I mean, if you wanted to retain somebody, you definitely want to start earlier than year 5.
And are there any performance bonuses paid?
Currently, that was in the last slide here, performance bonuses would be merit increases. So back in fiscal year 2008 was the first year that it was stopped. So if you looked at this slide again for last fiscal year and this fiscal year, and a successful employee, which is one of our ratings, with your market adjustment and your merit increases, would have lost 8.6% in pay over the last 2 fiscal years, and an outstanding employee, which we have 60% of high-performing employees, they would have lost 13.6% in pay over the last 2 fiscal years.
Is it possible to be a lousy employee and get longevity pay?
Yes, it is. Based on years of service only.
Is it also common that longevity pay is based on those who, by and large, have hit the top of a pay scale? Is that the way?
It's not. Longevity pay is strictly on years of service, and it's paid out in a lump sum amount. It's not added to your base pay. Thank you so much.
evening. My name's Dean Kokenauer, and I am your risk manager for the City of Goodyear. I'm going to talk a little bit about the risk management pie. The risk management pie that you see on the screen and in your handouts consists of about $7.3 million. When we take a look at that, we look at the bottom section where 64% of that pie, $4.7 million, is health care. So the majority of my presentation will be focused on the health care portion. When we typically think of, and some of these slides I'm going to go through real quickly, you've got them in your handouts and you can read those at your leisure. But when we think of risk management, we think of liability, property, and casualty losses. We think of suits against or claims against the city. We think about workers' compensation, employee injuries, the costs to insure that. We think about the safety process and being compliant with the laws. And in the risk management division here at the City of Goodyear, then we also do health, life, dental, short-term disability, and all of the benefits as well. Some of the fiscal impacts of cost reductions, again, those are in your handouts, and for the sake of time, I'm just going to go through those and allow you to read those at your leisure. So I go back to that risk management pie, and I go back to that $4.7 million. Historically, folks look at health care and go, well, that's just the cost of health care. It's going up all over. There's not a whole lot we can do. When people get sick, they get sick. Well, when we take a look at that from a risk management perspective, we say, no, there are things that we can do. If we can do two things, and two things only, we can control the cost of health care. Very simply, let's keep the healthy people healthy, and let's keep the chronically ill from getting worse. Now, how do we do that? Well, we put in place a comprehensive wellness strategy, and we put several elements together all at the same time. We have a Walk for Life program, weight loss challenge program, early detection testing, which is one of the keys of our program, where we have gone out and reached out to our employees with testing through Healthways, where there's a full blood draw, there's a questionnaire, and then the results are mailed to their house. We have found people in the course of the last 2 years that were diabetic that didn't know it. We have found people with high blood pressure that didn't know that. And those are the things that make a major impact on health care. The mammogram van that we have that comes on site that's free to the city, we have found one employee that had breast cancer that didn't know that. That employee is still with us today. Had that have gone unchecked for a longer period of time, we don't know. But one thing we know for sure is that we're impacting the cost of our health care in a positive way with a comprehensive wellness strategy. With those early detection programs, once upon a time, we would have 33, 35, 40% of our employee base participate. So the insurance committee got together and said, well, let's do this. Let's charge everybody 10% more of premium across the board. But if you participate in one of those 3 early diagnostic programs, we'll discount that premium 10%. This year, we're 99% participation. Oddly enough, people don't want to pay more money, but we are forcing them to be more accountable for their health. One of the things we do is we do surveys. We do 2 surveys a year. One's with our employee base. We reach out to the employees and say, what do you like about your health care, your dental, your vision programs that are out there today? How can we make it better for you? And then the other thing we ask them is, if we had to do some tweaking to the program, to changing some of those copays, what are the ones that we could do that would make the least impact on you? Then the insurance committee gets together and we sit down and discuss the results of both of those 2 surveys combined. This is from the benchmark cities, the same benchmark cities that you saw earlier in the presentation. And this kind of breaks down some of the key elements that most of us in the room associate with. In the first column, here on the left, and hopefully it's easier to read in your handouts, is doctor copays. That's a $15 copay, and the red bar would be the median, the green bar being the average, and we're right in line with our benchmark cities. We take a look at specialist copays, and we see it's about half. Well, what happened last year was United Healthcare, we changed to a different platform or a different program design, and in that program design, they had $15 copays for both primary and specialist. Next year, I anticipate that that won't be the same. I anticipate that that will be somewhere in the $20 to $30 range as we go into next year's renewal. If we take a look at the urgent care is at $35. That's very close to the median and the average. When we take a look at what's the most economical place for our folks to seek medical treatment, well, about a year ago, we said, you know, a lot of folks don't go see the doctor for the reason that it takes too long, it's a hassle, I'd rather wait. And what happens is they end up going to either urgent care or an emergency room visit. So we put in place an on-site clinic. And then we took that clinic and channeled our CDL exams through that, a major portion of our workers' compensation claims, and then opened it up to the employees' families as well. That clinic, as of today, is on track to see about 2,000 visits on an annual basis, and that has just started to kick up over the last 2 months. Those claims and that early detection portion is helping to offset our costs of health care going forward. The second most economical place for employees to go is a doctor's office. That costs us about $58. The third is the urgent care. That costs us about $78. When they go to the emergency room, which is the next step where the highest peak here is a $100 copay, that costs the city just a little bit over $800. That impacts our health care plan. So that's why the urgent care is at $35, the emergency room is at $100, and that coincides with both the median and the average of our benchmark cities. And then we take a look at the last 3 sets of columns is prescription drugs. Last year it was 10, 20, and 40. We changed that last year to 10, 30, and 50. And you'll see that both the formulary and the brand, the last 2 columns on your right, are actually higher than both the median and the average. Here we take a look at our dental program. In the first 2 columns, we see we're on par with both the median and the average of the benchmark cities. And then the 2 lower columns that you see, these 2 sections, are inpatient and outpatient. So if you're an outpatient, you're going to go have an MRI done. Historically, in the past, that used to be free. Well, last year we changed that, and it went from free to $250. And we take a look at both the median and the average, and we see that that is over both of those. If we take a look at inpatient, inpatient is actually at $250 and slightly less than both the median and the average. However, as we get into next year's renewal process, which is starting actually this week in terms of going to market, we would anticipate that both of those areas will increase substantially next year. And I anticipate that they will be dramatically over both the median and the average as we move forward. The last column there is the MedFlex pay. What that does is it allows employees to put money aside as pre-tax that they can use to pay for all of those co-pays we've talked about and over-the-counter prescriptions as well. Well, how much do we pay? The first 3 columns that we look at, those are the 3 columns that address employee-only premium and how much that is, a little over $400. If the employee did not participate in one of those early wellness diagnostic testing, then they would pay $41 of that premium. If they do participate, then that literally goes to 0. And again, the greatest opportunity for us is to keep the healthy healthy and keep the chronically ill from getting worse. If we can do those 2 things, we can flatline the increases that we've had over time. We take a look at the last 3 bars, and that's full family coverage. About 43% of our employees are on full family coverage. And we see that we're right in line, slightly less in terms of overall the amount that we pay, and right on target in terms of the amount the employee pays of that portion. And full family coverage for us right now runs about $13,600 a year, of which the employee pays about 14%. So some facts of interest. The insurance committee consists of about 12 members. They're made up of representatives of each of the key departments: police, fire, public works, parks, administration. But I would draw your attention on... If I didn't know better, I'd swear my time was up. Okay, well, I'll just talk louder, I think, unless the mic comes back. Okay, we'll just have to work with that. I draw your attention to the bullet points, which are number 3 and number 4. 1% of all of our claims make up 40% of all of our claim dollars. That's extremely out of the ordinary. What we would typically see is 1% would make up anywhere from 22% to 26% of all of our claims. What happened this last year is we had 2 catastrophic claims in the same year. That's never happened to us. We have one claim that's $750,000. We have one claim that's $500,000. And that's after the insurance company has taken all of their discounts. And we've had 10 large claims, those over $50,000. Over the course of the last 9 years, we've averaged about an 8.5% increase. And last year we were able to, with plan design and negotiation, get down to a 1.73% increase. However, the large claims and the catastrophic claims this year are creating a unique challenge for us as we move into next year's renewal. Where we're at today is 114% loss ratio. What that means is for every dollar we pay the insurance carrier, they pay out $1.14. If you were an insurance carrier, you would probably look at us and go, probably can't do that for too many more years. So here's some of the things that we're doing. One, we're going to go ahead and market our insurance program this year. I anticipate there will be additional cost shifting to the employees in terms of the percentages they pay. That's being discussed in the insurance committee today. I look for substantial increases in co-pays in terms of both in and outpatient. I look for the specialist co-pay to go up as well. I believe that we'll add what's called a high deductible plan to our overall package that we have. And what that means is that all of those expenses that the employee has up until the point of the deductible, they would pay themselves. So I look for us to add that this year, and then we look to potentially go with the carrier and give them multiple lines, such as life, vision, dental, and by doing so, we look that could potentially save us another 5 to 6 percentage points. And with that, I'll open to any questions you may have.
Howard Broadbeck. Nice presentation. I think that your 15% employee contribution on health care is probably a pretty reasonable thing to do. I assume most of white collar folks. That seems pretty reasonable. The question I have is, your contractual services under risk management. In 2007, they were $19,000. In 2008, they went up to $620,000. And then 2009, can you explain to us what caused that jump?
Absolutely. The reason that was is back years ago, the general liability policy, which we have a budget line item of $750,000, was spread out and dispersed to all of the city departments. And so at that time, the budget manager, now council member Joe Mazzillo, came and said, doesn't it make sense to have it all centralized? I said, absolutely, please, and thank you. And so all of those budgets from those departments was dropped into the risk management budget. Then in the next year, we added a benefit called the Retirement Health Savings Plan, because none of our retirees are on our health care plan. So what that Retirement Health Savings Plan cost was about $120,000, $126,000, and that's what contributed to the next year's increase.
So what you're saying between 2007 and 2008, other departments in the city had cost reductions in the neighborhood of about $600,000.
Correct.
Because their costs came to you. And what was that again? What those costs again?
$750,000 was the actual budget.
So what was it for again?
General liability, auto property, casualty. and we have a $13 million umbrella. Yes.
Question about the standard for other cities and the state with regard to the working leadership have for town government employees. Is that pretty standard over here as well?
If you didn't hear that, the question is the percentage that the employees pay, how does that compare across the state? The benchmark cities is the only thing that we compare to, and that's right in line with what other municipalities are asking their employees to pay. But that's gone up pretty much every year over the course of the last several years. And I also anticipate that ours will go up next year as well. Question?
Yeah, you indicated you had 99% participation in your wellness program. Do you see a return on that investment through a decreased use of sick leave days?
We don't track that. Great question. I just don't have a great answer on that one. Good question.
Yes, Gordon Fair. I just want to thank you for your presentation. I had previously submitted questions about what you presented, and your detail addressed each and every point. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Very good. I'd like to thank you also. It's a great presentation for a very complicated subject. Two very simple questions. Did you say that the mammograms that are done on the site are done for free?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And secondly, with respect to keep the healthy and the chronically ill getting worse, the city has no smoke policy.
There's no smoking inside of any of our buildings. We have introduced in the past a stop smoking program or smoking cessation. There are still some employees that still smoke, but we are whittling them down.
Okay, and I think that's very good. But with that, along with keeping track of what your outcomes are with respect to your wellness program, you're paying extra money and you got people involved, you don't know what the outcomes are. It's working with a couple of things that might work long term for you in terms of health care. So you've done it. Thank you.
Any other questions I can help address? Yes.
Very good, sir. Could you talk about your lost time injury rates over the last couple of years? Whether they're going up, down, and was the shooting of our sworn officer this past year one of our catastrophic events that we had to deal with?
Good questions. The lost time injury rate has actually been going up. It's now starting to stabilize and go back down. The biggest reason why that was occurring is we had several fire academies we started doing internally, and the first few we did, we had an uptick on the total injuries. So that was not a good thing, but now that's back under control. And again, probably the greatest indicator of where the city is would be what's called an experience modifier on workers' comp. If you have a 1.0 times the rate, that means you're the average municipality in the state of Arizona. The city of Goodyear today enjoys a 0.88 times the rate, so we automatically get a 12% discount up front because of our loss history and the things that we've done. In terms of Officer Melrose's injury, that's actually covered under workers' compensation. And that's a separate line of coverage and a separate bucket of money, if you will. So that had zero impact on health care. However, it is having an impact on workers' compensation costs. And we anticipate that our experience modifier today, 0.88, is going to uptick to somewhere in the low 90s because of that claim.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest we take a 10-minute break. We would have had to take a break shortly anyway to change the tape, but they would like to work on that sound system. So if we can take a 10-minute break, they can come in, work on the sound system, get it back up and operating.
Yeah, because if you look at this,
Thank you.
human resources division.
So
The next presentation, is it IT? Next presentation?
The middle slide.
I had hoped to see it.
No, me either. But it's number of authorized.
It's just out of order.
That's for the city, and it looks like it's.
Okay,
Look at
good.
the bifocal part of my glasses.
Okay, folks, thank you. They've changed out the tape. They fixed the sound, so we don't have to stop again to the end. I guess it's a 2-hour tape, so we're all set to go till 9. We're going to do finance now, so it's not in the same order as your tabs are, but we're going to do finance and IT. So if we could go ahead with finance. Let me make a suggestion. Excuse me. I can do that. We'll put this here. And then just use this for your slide change, not the mouse. It's easier.
Good evening. My name is Terry Canada, and I'm the budget manager here at the City of Goodyear. I just want to take a few minutes and kind of bring this back to the budget and kind of put in perspective. You're going to hear a number of departments speaking about what they do, and we just kind of want to talk about the resources that are involved in the budget and kind of tie that together before we get started with the department overviews. So the budgeted numbers that you have in front of you in the book, everything is from the fiscal year, the current fiscal year 9-10. The total budget for this year was adopted at $375 million. Of that, 19% is the operating budget. That's kind of the primary focus of the next couple weeks' discussions. All the departments are going to be in the operating budget. And then to further break this down, this gives you the pie by department. I've broke out tonight the pieces that we're going to talk about. Finance, HR just went. Clerk is going to be in there. Information technologies. The total for the operating budget is $73 million. Of these departments that you're listening to tonight, it represents about $13 million of the $73 million. And these are central services, and so the departments that are going to be talking tonight actually provide support to the other city departments. And again, it represents about 13% of the operating budget. Simply, I'm going to go through a couple slides here that are for every single department that you're going to have that are consistent. What we're demonstrating here is just kind of a financial org chart. Human resources, again, we just talked about it. It's about a $2.2 million operating budget. It consists of 3 divisions. Here, they follow the discussion that Kay and staff just gave you. Again, we talked a little bit about the volunteer program, which is broken out here. So for every department, you're going to see the same financial chart. And then the other thing we've included in your booklets are substantial budget reductions that have occurred over the last 2 years. Moving into the base budget year for 2009, you'll see a listing of budget reductions. And then we also did the same thing moving from the base budget for 10, and we've done mid-year adjustments this year. In there you'll see listed all of the positions will be listed out and called out by name. Then we've also identified line items, and I've kind of categorized those. Your consultant services, I heard that too. The next thing that you're going to find in your books is kind of just resource allocation. Again, this will be done by division. And this is for HR summary here. And you'll see resource allocation by expenditure category. So what you're going to see in the top box is categories by personnel services, contractual, commodities. That's kind of how we budget the operating components here. And you're going to see 3 years' worth of actual expenditures and then the current year budget. Also listed by division is going to be a little historical information on the positions and then any changes that have taken place over the last couple of years and then budgeted year to date. As the departments speak, they'll probably have changes that are currently happening. Like Kay was talking about, we have some vacant positions, we have some frozen positions. The departments may elaborate on some changes that are currently going on. So again, I'm just going to go through this. There's another one for risk management, which was Dean's division that he was talking about, and the next one is employee development, which is the third division with HR. So again, you'll find these consistent reports for every department that's in the
Okay.
Any questions? Now, I want to point out, this is impossible to read in the handout. It's hard to read up there, the smaller print. It'll be posted. It's very easy to make it larger. I think what we'll try to do next week, if we get some data that is so small, we'll print it 2 up instead of 3 up, so you can read it in the booklet. I think it'll be a little easier to follow.
The other thing is, it's in
Pardon
the
me?
budget book.
It's under finance. Under finance, there's a colored piece of paper. Mine is kind of orangey. It's behind the orangey paper in that finance tab.
The other thing is, in the budget book, we've got, and if you look in the department summaries, you'll find a very similar chart. Probably has, in the budget book, we actually have estimates and then the current year's budget. It's obviously a little bit more similar.
This presentation will be in that same tab, but it's the stuff before the orange driver page.
Okay, my name is Larry Lang. I am the finance director. This portion of the discussion, I'm just going to focus on the finance department. It's kind of back office. What is it that we do, and to review that. I'm going to do this quite briefly. I'm not going to read each of the slides, as you do have a copy of them. If I miss anything, you can ask me a question at the end, and I'll be happy to go back to it. My experience, my 34-year career has spent about 20 years directly working for government and about 14 years in the private sector, 10 of which was a CPA, partner in a national CPA firm, and then the other 4 as a consultant, and then 20 directly working for government. I've been with the City of Goodyear for 5 years now. And participated in a number of statewide efforts prior to that. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. The organization chart is very hard to read on this copy that we have, but the departments going across and from the left, Budget and Research Division is one of the divisions. I'll go through each of these. The CFD Administration Division, Customer Service, that's for utility customer service, and the Controller Office, and included in the Controller in all of the budget sheets that you see is the administration, of which includes myself and a couple of other people. And then finally, the Procurement Office is the 5th division. At the bottom right hand on this slide, the 3 red positions are positions that were frozen this past April. And staff, this is kind of a reporting line organization chart. The staff within these cross these lines constantly, whether it be the administrative assistant managing contracts for procurement or the contract administrator doing development agreements that relates more to the administrative side. So this shows where they report, and we'll talk a little bit about the functions as we go through there. The administrative area is responsible to manage overall the city's financial affairs. Part of that, we manage the financial system, security controls, who has access to what accounts, as well as a contract database. We try to make sure that we're ensuring compliance with the city's fiscal and investment policies and overseeing the city's debt management program. I'm not going to read each of these, but the city's bond rating for general obligation bonds, Standard & Poor's has our bonds rated at A+, and Moody's has them rated at A1. Interestingly, Standard & Poor's rates our bonds that we finance the ballpark and the related facilities at AA-. They rate those bonds higher because of the security on them with the sales tax pledge. The general accounting area manages the accounts payable, the payroll, the traditional controller's office type areas that you would expect to see, and produces the financial or the annual financial report, which you saw a copy of probably in the materials you were receiving. This is a handout copy, also referred to as the audit report. The city's accounting system has 90 different funds, and the expenditures are expenditure line items approximate 6,500. So it's in governmental accounting, it gets extremely complex as to what things are put, and it creates some very large numbers that we administer. The audited financial statements, referred to as a comprehensive annual financial report, did receive this past year the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Finance Officers of America. We do have some other output factors. Put these in only to give you a frame of reference. It's kind of hard to say accounts payable. There's 2 accounts payable clerks. What is it that they do? Well, these are some frame of reference. I don't know if they're helpful or not, but we tried to put some in there to give you a little bit of an idea. The next division is budget and research. There are, I believe it's 6 different employees in budget and research. Each has a different function. We have a sales tax auditor who also provides revenue estimates as part of their functions. We have a contract administrator that oversees compliance with a number of our development agreements, that also serves as a budget analyst, and each position and each of these functions, we find that we have the people working in cross areas like that. Some of the variables that we do, the department, the budget report, which a copy has been made available or is online, has received the award in excellence from the Governmental Finance Officers Association for 15 straight years. We have 66 different development agreements that we are tracking the terms of, which include reimbursements of about $2.1 million. We also bill out an assessment district that we have, which is to pay for the infrastructure that surrounds the proposed mall area on McDowell, north of I-10. Those billings were sent out, and that's what that $2.4 million that is referred to on this schedule is. At the last meeting, you heard a question relating to the community facilities districts. What are community facilities districts? The community facilities districts are a special purpose tax levying public improvement district. They are a separate legal entity from the city of Goodyear. We do have a CFD division within the finance department. The responsibilities of that division are to administer the activities of those community facilities districts. So as we talk about revenues of those districts, those revenues are not City of Goodyear revenues. Those revenues belong to those individual 10 districts. They're formed for the purpose of financing public infrastructure and improvements. Generally, that public infrastructure and improvement are improvements that would be funded by the developer in that process, and this is a tool for them to do that. It does not fund traditionally municipal financed infrastructure, although obviously those lines can blur a little bit in the discussion. There are a total of $120 million worth of CFD bonds that are outstanding at this point in time. And as I indicated, it is a separate legal entity, and that the services that we provide are to administer the affairs for those community facilities districts. Interestingly, as part of that, some special assessment bonds were sold. We send about 4,600 bills a year for those, and that is to bill $2.6 million. As I showed you a couple of slides ago on the improvement district that's around the McDowell Road commercial corridor, that was about $2.4 million, and I think we sent a total of 12 bills. A lot easier to administer than these are. All of the costs for administering the community facilities districts are paid to the city by those districts, so that those are fully self-sufficient. The next division I want to talk about briefly is the utility customer service area. One of the areas that we do there is we maintain the call center, process utility applications, and deal with customer service issues for our various utilities. That's for the water, the sewer, and the sanitation accounts. As part of that also, we administer the collections, and that was the top one. I'm not sure why we put it on top, but over the past year, we sent about $24,000 pre-collection letters, is probably a better term, and then after that, they would get sent to a collection agency. We also, in using the collection agency, recovered about $22,000 this past year. Interestingly, over and above that, the city contracts with APS to provide payment services. If you come in to pay your bill, you will actually pay it at the APS counter. That is not the service provided in the customer service area. Customer service is new accounts or problems with your accounts, those types of issues. We also provide the main City Hall lobby information center. We staff that. City Hall lobby is open from 7:30 to 5. And we also, and I forgot to mention this in the org chart, HR mentioned it, Kay mentioned it in her discussion. We have about 6 volunteers in the finance department over and above the positions that you saw there. They provide us about 15 hours a week. Some of those volunteers actually do help man that front desk over lunch hours. Also, the volunteers help us in our utility areas as well as in our accounts payable and accounting areas and throughout the department. I'll just move through these. Interestingly, over the past few years, and we did this for an independent study, but I thought you would be interested to see this. The top blue line on this chart shows a number of new applications for either water, sewer, or sanitation service. And you can see that from 2006 to 2007, the numbers dropped, but then they've been increasing since that period of time. At the same time, we looked at what's happening with terminations, and that is the red line that starts at the bottom but goes up into the middle. And those increased from about what looks like about 1,400 to just over 2,000. The single-family residential building permits as the third line as kind of a frame of reference, because you would expect the growth in the new applications to be taking place as a result of new building going on. Our building activity has decreased significantly, as shown by the green line. My interpretation as I read this is that we're probably having a little more turnover within houses, more applications, more activity. The net new residents seems to be staying about the same. That's the gap between the blue line and the red line. But the activity levels are increasing just because of the terminations and then someone else moving into that house. The final area within the finance department is the procurement and mailroom areas. The procurement office provides purchasing and contract support for all of the departments, does all formal and informal solicitations for bid proposals. Informal proposals are those that obtain quotes, 3 quotes, and those would be for items between $5,000 and $50,000. When they're over $50,000, it's required to be a more formal process. We also provide centralized print, copy, and mail services for the entire city. And these, again, are a few of the outputs that they have in the procurement office. This office has received the Sterling Award through the National Institute of Governmental Purchasing for 5 years running, and that is for fully certified procurement staff. Over the past couple of years, some of the budget impacts that this department has seen, the staff reduction has been in 3 positions: 1 customer service representative, a budget analyst, a mail and copy clerk, and then other line items. Some of the efficiencies that have been worked on, a user fee study. The City Council is going to see the first, their presentation on it next Monday, which outlines the various fees that are charged for services. This is outside of the utilities area. This would be various other services provided throughout the organization. Cost allocation plan, which is allocating administrative costs and the property and casualty insurance to the various departments, so that when user fees are determined, that those costs are taken into consideration. And we've been doing a lot of cross-training on the finance department, cross-divisions, and the cross-functional. With that, I'll take any questions. I know we went real quick, but didn't want to put anyone to sleep.
Howard Broadbeck.
Yes, sir.
On the CFDs, you actually, if I read this correctly, is the city actually turning a slight profit on the CFD debt service anyway, or is that just a timing issue in these general fund?
That would be a timing issue on the financial statements. Okay. Some of the CFDs and the general obligation bonds have July 15th due dates, and our year end is June 30th.
Okay. And then the second question is just kind of in general. You know, I looked at your of all these departments, the 06 spending versus 09 spending, actuals, not budgets. And in the finance department's case, you know, your measures that you report for all the departments, in your case, you report accounts payable, checks issued, purchase orders issued, and water meters read as your operating indicators for your function. And the meters read is up 30%, purchase orders are down 10%, and this is from 2006. And accounts payable, checks issues are up 10%. But when you look at the finance budget, it's gone from 1.8 million to about 2.8 million. And that's a 30% increase. I'm sorry, that's a 60% increase in spending since 2006. What's contributed to that, and what are the possibilities of getting back to that 2006 level? What have you been asked to do differently or more that's caused that kind of swing?
I'll give you a few examples of it, and then I can give you a full reconciliation that we'll do as a follow-up on this. But a few examples. And that is a very good and fair question. This year I mentioned 3 positions that were eliminated in the finance department. Simultaneously, 2 functions were added to the finance department that added 3 positions to do different things. The customer service advocate was not there before this fiscal year. That was in another department.
What department was that?
That was in the department that was referred to that went away. It was called Community Services. And that department went away, and we absorbed that particular function. We also took the capital improvement plan function away from, and position away from the city manager's office this past year. So throughout the years, there have been changes to that effect that have happened in there. The mailroom used to be in the city clerk's office in 06. Today, it's in this office. But it's a very good question, and I'd like to be able to answer that in a little more depth.
Okay. Yeah, just for reference, in '09, there was a community services spending of 1.2 million. So that I'm only referring to through '09. So the transfer out you're saying would have happened in 2010 for you, right?
That would be correct on that example of those three positions. That would be
Is it a possibility? I mean, could your department get back to 2006 expenditures and still run the city?
Oh,
I'm just wondering, are there new reporting standards? I mean, it's a huge increase of 30%. When it's really not, because the city was growing at such a fast rate. But now that it's backing off, looking at it as a sort of a reference point, 2006. Is that the kind of is that the sort of range you could get back to, since things are? We got fewer people working in the city. Obviously, you're not issuing as many purchase orders, that kind of stuff.
And the answer to that is, I don't think we can get back to those levels. And some of those levels deal with accounting issues, keeping the accounting records current and so forth, and those standards. Some do also deal with other changes, as I've indicated, in just the functional areas. The procurement function, for example, at that time was one position, and that was simply a buyer, and nothing was centralized. That person was just facilitating some buying, whereas now all of the contracts are running through there. But this is a good question, and I'd like to be able to.
That's another area where it would have reduced work in other departments, right? Because if that procurement function is being done by you, then each of the departments who was, you would assume was out buying stuff on their own, those would have had some reductions.
But they wouldn't have had, because they wouldn't have had a person in each of those departments that's all they did.
Right.
So I don't think you'd see across the board on there. Yes.
And your collection area, you said that you sent out 24,000 collection letters, and you recovered that doesn't say that you recovered any internally, but you sent them then to a collection agency?
Only after the collection letter was sent, and that gave a period of time.
Okay.
If I remember right, it was 2 weeks. After that period of time, the collection letter referred to said that in 2 weeks, if this is not taken care of, we will send it to a collection agency. What I didn't measure, and I saw those two together, and it's like, well, that looks confusing. 24,000 letters to generate $22,000 doesn't seem a lot, but that's pre-collection. That's the letters that we sent out before that. We also just started in this past year using a collection agency, so that's the beginning of that program. That's why we threw that in as another thought. So the $22,000 on that chart is for the follow-up from the startup of that program.
What was the debt? How many thousands of dollars did you turn over to the collection agency?
I would have to get you that answer. I can't answer that.
Because I know the collection rate's not very high.
Yes, sir.
Martin Fair, some of the revenues are collected on a monthly basis. Has there been given any thought to collecting them less frequently, let's say quarterly, in order to save mailing cost and perhaps labor cost?
I think that that's a fair question to look at. No, that hasn't been looked at closely. You also will have some cash flow issues that would go along with that we would have to look as part of it, but I think that that's a fair thing to look at.
Yeah, I was thinking if that were a direction that might be taken, it'd probably be more beneficial to collect the money up front, so you can deal with the delinquencies in a more orderly manner.
And for water, that gets a little difficult because the actual structure is based on direct usage. So it would almost have to be some kind of a payment up front to be able to do that.
One more. Howard Broadbeck. 2008, our investment income was $5.6 million, and now in 2009 it dropped to only $270,000. And I realize that returns on CDs and money markets and those kind of things. Are you restricted by pretty much by by legislation of where you can actually put the investment money? And has it gone down that much because the amount of money we have to invest has decreased dramatically, or is it because the returns have gone down dramatically?
That is a number of questions, all of which are very good ones, and that's fine. First, the numbers that you're looking at are citywide, but they also, I believe, include the community facilities districts. And so the cash balances there are also invested. There are several things that have happened. Cash balances have declined. Yields have clearly declined. And then also a lot of our money, both in the CFDs and in the cities, are invested in the local government investment pool, which is administered by the state treasurer's office. Unfortunately, the state treasurer's office had an investment in what was an investment grade investment known as Lehman Brothers back in September, and the city's share of that, including the CFDs and all funds, was $1.4 million. The general fund impact of that was only $350,000. But
to us? You're saying to us? $350,000 to us?
Yeah. The city's general fund impact was $350,000.
Right.
Other funds that we administer, including the CFDs, bring that total to a higher level. But yes, the general fund impact of that was $350,000. So the investment returns, not only did the rates drop off the table over the past year and the amounts invested dropped, but then that loss was recognized in the same year, which exacerbated the comparison of the 2 years.
Are the returns coming back at all in the 2010?
Right now, we are looking at revising our investment policies and looking at possibly self-administering some of our investments and moving out of the LGIP. I'm saying we're looking internally, have to discuss with the City Council. Our yields are, I want to say, 0.2%. They're very low.
Larry, did the ballpark timing issues with the PIC bonds being issued first and then construction being paid upon actual completion have an effect on our investment income?
It would have an effect on the investment income for those construction funds, and they still remain within the construction funds today until those projects are completed. I'm talking for accounting purposes.
But I'm saying, yes. When we first issued bonds, we didn't have to pay out all the bond funds to the construction companies. Weren't we able to invest those at a sufficient rate 2 years ago, and because those funds have been paid out, we don't have those investments now?
Okay, when we invested those funds, we invested them in the local government investment pool also, which is a more liquid fund. That's one of the reasons we're looking at expanding, so we can go a little longer in some maturities. The proceeds, though, the interest earnings on that money stays with those funds, stays with the bonds until the project is complete. It does not accrue over to the general fund.
Sally Kagan, can you go through the rainy day fund in detail and how it's determined? I understand it's by charter, 5%. Can that be changed in any way?
Yes, and there was a presentation, city manager did a presentation the other night on this issue that I thought really kind of covered it. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I would, because he kind of went through some things that I don't have the advantage of those graphics. It is not 5%. The limit, the charter establishes a fund that is up to 4 months of cash flow operating expenditures out of the general fund. 4 months of the general fund, which are just the operating expenses, that worked out to about $17 million. Rather than put words. Do you want to answer the second half about can it go up and down? I think you did that well the other night.
Yes, it can go. Yes, it can go up and down. It's been as high as I think it was 35.7 million a couple of years ago, but it's just now it's down at the 16.9 million because that's what's required in the city charter. And I'd be happy to send a copy of the presentation that I made to the city council on Monday night. See if there are other questions that it might generate.
And John, the question about can that be changed? How does one change the charter?
The question about how does one change the charter is through a charter commission, and one has to be called by the city council, and then they look at the charter and make any recommendations to change it with the vote of the people approving it.
Joan, should I have one more question about the rainy day fund? My understanding, the rainy day fund is actual dollars. It is actual real money in an account, right?
That is correct. It is cash, yes.
It is cash. Nothing can touch the spending of that money unless city council decides or votes to do that.
That is correct.
The only income or the only change in the balance should be income generated from interest.
No, there is no
There is no
interest earning.
interest
That
on that
interest
account.
is in the general fund. The city council is the only one that can change that balance in any way, increasing it or decreasing it.
Okay, so it sits in a fund of its own. It doesn't generate any income. If it does, it goes into the general fund?
The interest itself, all of our investments are pooled throughout the city, and then they're allocated through the various activities. The rainy day fund, so to speak, does not accrue interest by itself. That interest is included within the general fund interest.
Okay. So there, and we have found extra money in the rainy day fund.
That's not correct.
No, and that's the fund balance presentation that we referred to from the other night. The rainy day fund, as it's being referred to, was adopted by the city council, and that amount has not changed since adopted by the city council.
So where did the 24 million come from versus the 20?
The $24 million was a conglomerate of the fund balance at the end of the year. That's where I would really suggest you look at the presentation. The charts that were there the other night outlined those costs and where all of those monies went. And I would
I saw
encourage
it.
everyone to look at that.
I saw it. It deals in percentages, and it didn't really have actual dollars and actual showing things like this. It dealt in percentages. And one of my questions I had asked is, when instead of having just pie charts, if we could have our presentations actually show the dollars that represented besides the percentages. I mean, show the percentages, but also show the actual dollars that are represented.
That's why, and when Terry Canada made the presentation, she showed you on the pie chart both percentages and actual dollars.
For HR?
No, for the whole city.
Oh.
Sorry, Howard Broadway, you mentioned that thing called fund balances, and you report each year what the fund balance is. Can you just, for a layperson, can you explain exactly what do we mean by fund balance? And I'm talking about the general fund unreserved fund balance. What is that? What is that thing?
Okay. And by the way, the accounting standards are changing on that fund balance, so the next annual financial report you see for Goodyear, which will be June 30th, 2010, will look a little bit different than this, and it'll actually look a little more consistent with the presentation and the discussion. The fund balance in the financial statements for the general fund, includes basically the net of the assets and the liabilities for that fund. And those assets and liabilities generally are, in a business model, what you would refer to as current assets and current liabilities. It's more like working capital. It does not include infrastructure or other long-term assets, nor does it include long-term debt. And that difference is the fund balance, and it's a result of activities for the year. So when you look at a revenue and expenditure report for the general fund, that really is very much comparable to a cash flow statement that you would look at in a private environment. I say comparable, that's not accurate because it's still working capital and not cash. But for that principle, it's a flow of resources that is going through revenues coming in, expenditures going out, including those for capital. At the end, you have fund balance. The components of that...
is it truly a balance, though? I mean, it's net assets remaining?
Yes.
Okay, so in 08 it was 42 million, and in 09 it was 29 million. So that balance of current assets dropped by whatever that is, 11, 12, 13 million dollars.
Yeah.
Okay, but starting in 2009 there was 29 million dollars of assets available to be applied to the following year budget.
That's correct.
Okay.
The first $5 million of it, because you've heard reference to a $24 million number also, the first $5 million of that were projects that were actually carried over to the next year's budget. In Arizona, when you budget a project, at June 30th, that budget goes away. It lapses. Right. So you rebudget it the next year to keep that project active so that your contract will keep going. So we pull that off the top there.
How often do you estimate the fund balance for the current year?
As for the current year, we watch to make sure it's not going negative.
Right.
Outside of that, we do not administer that very closely because going up really is not anything you would do with in that current year. For the following year, it is actually about now that we start estimating that fund balance for, in this case, for 10, 11.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have an estimate for it now or no?
We do have an estimate for it now, which would be $18.9 million, basically, no, $2 million. We're going to change terminology, and that's part of that. The rainy day fund or contingency that's talked about, we're pulling that out of fund balance for this purpose, and next year in the financial statements, you'll see it shown as being reserved. Okay. Then that undesignated, unreserved fund balance will show at $2 million is what we're projecting today.
From 29 at the end of 09.
Yeah, but that 29 did, yes. The one, I'm assuming no carryovers, everything will be done as of June 30th, and two, that 29 million did include that rainy day fund. Right. For presentation in the future, that rainy day fund will be shown a couple lines up where it'll show as reserved.
Which, if I do the math right, would say we applied $22 million of general fund to the 210 expenditures. If it's going from 29 to 2 and there's a $5 million rainy day fund that's no longer being reported, that's a $7 million difference, right?
No, it's a $16.9 million rainy day fund.
Oh, okay. All right, so that's a 10. So it's $12 million of there. So between 10 and $12 million that's been applied to the 010 spending from to reduce the fund balance going forward on a comparable basis.
I'm going to ask again on that presentation only because of carryovers. It's a lot more complex than that. But conceptually.
I understand
conceptually,
what
you're there.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's really saying there's not much of a unreserved general fund balance remaining.
That is correct. Okay. I thank you.
IT.
You guys actually have pretty good numbers. Help desk requests are up 50%.
Good evening. I'll start off by saying that's probably a tough act to follow. No pun intended, Larry. My name is Kathy Fernandez. I am the director for the Information Technology Services Department. I've been with the city for a little over 2 years. Came to City of Goodyear from City of Scottsdale, where I was within the technology department in various positions, mostly management, kind of throughout those years, for about 13 years. And previous to that, I was served in the United States Navy for two deployments to the Persian Gulf. I focused on technology in the military, but it was primarily electronics, a little bit different, but similar concept. I have a master's degree of information technology with emphasis on network architecture and design, and a bachelor's also in information technology with an emphasis on network and telecommunications, and a couple other various alphabet soup there for some of my certifications. I'm not going to read the slides. I'll try to move this on along to hopefully make up some of the time that we spent on the last presentation. Mission and vision statement were actually created new when I arrived here. It was a team effort. It's a relatively immature department in terms of tenure and experience. So this was a really good learning opportunity for that department. The primary responsibility, obviously, of the IT department is to facilitate all business processes. We don't really create anything. We just make it better. Kind of like, I think we stole that from 3M, their marketing philosophy. Our org chart, this is really hard for me to even see. Same as everyone else. The red at the bottom is a position that was frozen about 1.5 years ago. That position, the role of that position is actually being filled by our senior project manager, doing a great job. I think each of you received a report on the matrix, not necessarily the full matrix. If you did, there was probably information that alluded to or was very directly pointed out that information technology was one of the departments within the organization that actually needed a couple of enhancements, and the senior project manager was one of those. That person actually fills the application manager role now on an interim basis, and it's long-term. She has an extensive background in application development and program development and such, so it's very conducive to expanding that area for the city. Oops, where did I go? I hit something here.
That's the right arrow or left arrow?
Yeah. We have 3 primary service program areas that are kind of similar to divisions, and I think the finance department went along the same way, focusing on those divisions. Probably make it a little bit easier for you all to understand. This is traditional technology, information technology structure. There's no mystery here. Again, we'll start with administration. This, again, was the area where we added the recommendations that were included in the matrix report, which included project management specifically and security. Upon my arrival, there was a couple of vulnerabilities in that area that were extremely important that we had needed to address. Some of them were mandated by law. We have since implemented them and are continuing to improve in those areas as well. And obviously, just typical management oversight, which is strategic planning, service level agreements, and very importantly, disaster recovery preparedness, again, another area that was identified as a vulnerability within the matrix report. Output performance measures, you're going to note that some of my information is all statistics as opposed to graphs and such. These are industry standard performance measures, and they're typically based on widgets, number of widgets, how quick you respond to repairing them, and so forth, just for ease of understanding. A lot of these performance measures, in particular for administration, are specifically due to the addition of the project manager and the security administrator. Again, both areas identified as a vulnerability within the matrix report. Technical services is really our responsiveness. That's what our customers, which are most all city staff, see and feel, and it's tangible to them. What they call a help desk, someone responds. That's primary call center, general desktop support, and such. Infrastructure support is the stuff behind the curtain. Most people don't recognize what it means. It's also one of the more expensive areas within any IT department. And then telecommunications and telephony, again, that's the back house stuff that most people don't recognize. There's a whole lot more to a telephone system, obviously, than the handset on your desk. These are the back-end services that most people don't recognize happen. Output performance measures in those areas, again, are number of desktops that we have in the organization, which we've been diligently trying to reduce. As there's reductions in staff, positions change, we take advantage of those opportunities to try and reduce our output in this area and reduce overall number of commodity. One of the key things on this is the amount of data. For those of you that are familiar with information technology, all that electronic data in most cases, particularly in a city, is mandated by law. There are state statutes that govern the type of data that we store, the length, the duration, et cetera, how it's accessible. There's legal ramifications and whatnot. As we become more mature and more sophisticated, I should say, from a technology perspective, that number is going to grow significantly. There's a huge dollar associated with that particular number as well. Telephones includes mobile and landlines. Again, every opportunity, staff departures, staff changes, condensing of assigned responsibilities, those are all opportunities to try and reduce these numbers. Not only do you pay for the device itself, you pay for the maintenance, the back end. There's a long line of costs associated with each of these devices. The next area is applications and business analysis. This area wasn't hit too heavily within the matrix report. This is probably one of the areas where we could grow and introduce a lot more efficiencies into the organization. One of the areas where you might make the from the matrix report is the HTE, the enterprise resource solution that we use internally. That was a big target within the, and I don't mean that in a negative way, that was a big topic of discussion within that matrix report. This is the division or the service area that actually manages that application and would potentially do the business analysis to ultimately replace that when funds become available. One of the new things we've added, and it's kind of dovetails into one of the comments that HR had indicated with employee development. We're starting to incorporate technology training programs, not necessarily dedicated to a particular type of technology, but it's as you bring in more applications, it facilitates the implementation for staff so that they actually know how to use the technology, which is huge. You'd be surprised how many folks implement things, turn them on, and then they don't know how to use them. We probably experience that in our own houses some days. The outputs here are very self-explanatory. Within the enterprise resource application, the HTE product that you may know it by, Larry probably mentioned a couple of the performance measures that are more tangible to the folks in the audience, but I'll go through a couple. There's a lot of I want to call them individual business units here, which might apply more to some of you in the audience in the private sector. Payroll, fixed assets, accounts payable and receivable, cash receipts for all areas that process and handle money, permitting, planning and zoning, code enforcement. These are each individual very diverse business units. That enterprise resource tool actually, that's the purpose for that. There's a number of applications that you can spin off on a one business unit, a one business function, and build a whole infrastructure to support that. So it's one of the key elements of the HTE product and those types of programs is that they put that umbrella over all of those business units. That really increases the efficiencies in terms of reporting to you all as citizens, tying all that data in the back end. It makes it more usable information. Some of the cost reductions that we've implemented, again, as the application or manager position for quite some time now. We eliminated hourly overtime, which means we are dark in the evenings. We haven't had too many problems yet. Our police department, and it really affects primarily public safety. They're pretty understanding. We're implementing better technology to hopefully minimize the outages they may experience after hours because we don't have staff to support that. What we're doing now is even management, including myself, being that I am still competent in my own opinion technically, I respond to calls for support if I can't help. That minimizes the one or two people that are taking the majority of the calls. And again, right now it's not a big deal. Hardware maintenance, that's a difficult one to reduce. There's a very, obviously it's a calculated risk. It's a very important one to make note of, though. In some cases, you could end up in a very interesting situation if you don't have maintenance. And then this was a big one. A lot of the efficiencies, and we'll go over that in one of the next slides, are implementing and taking advantage of existing infrastructure to help minimize our dependency on our service providers externally. There's a decent reduction in costs because we canceled unused circuits. What we're doing is leveraging some infrastructure, again, from our traffic operations center, and that gives us that opportunity to kind of reduce some of the, again, those dependencies, and there's a cost associated with each of those. Efficiencies implemented, I won't go through all of them. Each of these are, one of the big ones, and I'm quite proud of, is the 300% increase in speed for network communications. This is huge. Most of our departments, when I arrived here, were operating at the speed of a dial-up modem and trying to conduct business that way, and we have over 15 sites, is extraordinary. So this is a huge accomplishment for us. We did it at a relatively low cost, but we were also able to reduce costs in terms of monthly expenditures for our external service providers. And the rest are stuff you may not know, but what they're doing is allowing us to become more efficient and, again, improving the services we deliver to our user community. Some of the things that we're considering is reducing the number and the type of printing solutions. That's a huge expense, all the way down from the paper that you use, the ink that you buy, and the electricity to run the darn things. We're looking at every area. We are doing, right now, researching opportunities to consolidate and manage centrally cell phones. For those of you that don't know, this is quite a task. There's a lot of dialogue, and even in private sector, on how you can manage this. We do have mobile force staff. It's important that we sustain that as a business communication forum. Otherwise, it prohibits them from doing their job, at least efficiently. So that there's a trade-off with that. It's essentially a cost of doing business. What we're trying to do is reduce how much we spend on it. Some of the other efficiencies we're considering are unified communications, where you can use virtual telephones as opposed to an actual telephone on your desktop. And just for a point of reference, a telephone that you may have in your office is about as much as your computer because it's just as powerful. If we can eliminate that and reduce it to one computer, so to speak, per person, we've cut our costs in half. It's a stretch. It's a completely different concept in terms of telephone communications. So, we're going to try to look for little pockets of areas and people that are willing to try to move forward with this. The challenge that we have in that particular efficiency and any other is it costs money to implement those efficiencies. So you have to find a balance, essentially. And that is the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
All your landlines, telephone landlines, they all go through your budget?
Yes, they do. And for those of you that might notice some fluctuations in the budget, keep in mind I've been here for 2 years. The department was, the allocation for the department in terms of expenditures for particular telephones, mobile communications, software, and those sorts of things, we are centralizing that and trying to manage it so we can develop a total cost of ownership, which is huge.
So those costs also came out of all the other departments?
We're in the process of doing that now. Correct.
How about cell phones? Are all the cell phones purchased by you? In other words, you have all the contracts? So people can have their own personal cell phone and they just submit it in an expense report?
No, we do have a policy that governs mobile communications, and I'll include cell phones in that category. Mobile or cellular phones are distributed through policy, and it's a condition of the job. If you're on call, if you're
mobile. So John has
a
cell phone, right?
John
City cell
actually,
phone.
yeah, correct. We distribute a device.
And do you pay the bill for that cell phone, or does he pay
No.
the bill and he gets reimbursed?
Right now, it is individually in each department. We are in the process of consolidating and at the same time centralizing the management of that.
So John's department does his cell phones one way, and
Correct.
Larry's does it another way.
Correct. So
in
you can
your department, John, do you have your own personal cell phone that you submit an expense report to get reimbursed for, or is there a city contract for all the cell phones in your department?
I have both. I have a personal cell phone, but I pay for that, and then I have a city cell phone, a BlackBerry, that the city pays for.
Okay, but you haven't consolidated them all under
No,
one?
we're conducting research right now. There's obviously an opportunity to reduce costs, economy of scale. You go out for one plan opposed to 15 or 200. Huge opportunities there to reduce costs and streamline operations.
Plus, when you line up all the contracts together.
Exactly, and that's what we're doing.
That's when you get the saving.
What we're looking for now, just for your knowledge, is, and someone asked a question on this, and I asked for more information, and I hadn't heard back yet, so hopefully this will help clarify some of that. What I'm looking to do is come up with 4 different plans. Air cards, which are a requirement for police and mobile communications for mobile laptops. Cellular phones. Data devices, which are BlackBerries, where you are able to access email. And then pagers. An example of where you might use pagers, when I reduced my overtime and had to go dark at night, my hourly staff was no longer on call. So there was no reason to provide a cellular device. They went to pagers. The pagers are now used, if you're in building X and I want to stop you before you go to building Y, I can page you and say I need you to do something in that location. So you're not wasting travel time.
Have you ever looked at outsourcing your help desk and tech support?
Right now, we actually outsource our cable management, which is all the back house plumbing, if you will.
How about the people who answer the phone when an employee has a question about my laptop's not working?
What I'm doing, and I think someone over here talked about collaborating with other agencies, and I'm not sure who asked about that. I consider myself a driver in this, is we've revived a quarterly meeting with all of the, I want to say most of the state CIOs and technology leaders. We try to meet quarterly, and we're looking for opportunities for people that have already experienced this. They did the research, they've established pros and cons.
The smaller your use group, the more savings you can get. So you being a small use group, the relative savings you would get by going to an outsource is greater than if you had a really big organization.
That's not necessarily true, because it really depends on the service that you provide. For instance, some technology departments across the valley have services for GIS technology. Their level of support for their public safety is extraordinary. So it depends on the service that you provide. And you're right, there's opportunities for that. But what I was trying to establish was we currently outsource our cable management. And typically that's probably the lowest paid position within an IT department. There's primarily because it's not very overly complex. We pay almost, I want to say at least $90 an hour for that service, in addition to materials. I'm here to tell you right now, without even looking at it, that's twice what I would pay for staff. So it depends on the service, the level of service, the frequency of use. There's a number of variables in that. And again, I'm trying to take advantage of someone else's work in those areas and look to other agencies that they've already investigated this, or they outsource components of. Absolutely everything within an IT department, just like most other departments, is something that can be outsourced. There's trade-offs. The costs are typically higher, but it really depends on the level of service. And those are areas that absolutely merit further evaluation. We've considered it. We haven't implemented it at this point. Was there? Yes, sir.
How do you monitor for any employee misuse of computers and other technology?
Well, I've been in the HR department regularly since my arrival. Having come from a very mature, particularly in the area of technology agency, and probably just the federal government, I'm a proponent of rules. It just makes things easier. I've worked with HR since I've been here and had input into almost all of the policies that govern employee behavior with electronic devices, let's just say, for ease of discussion. With the recommendations from Matrix and our ability to move forward with one of those, which was to add a security arm, if you will, we have implemented a number of practices that are electronic, they're sustainable, reportable. We've established policies that govern, it depends on the department. For instance, police department's going to have a little bit more latitude in use because they have different disciplines where they actually do research that requires they do things that we probably wouldn't, a normal person probably wouldn't. So we have all of that information electronically. And that, I want to say that we implemented that probably within the first year. Not only just to determine misuse, but it's a huge vulnerability. So it was a win-win situation for us.
First of all, thank you for your service. Secondly, when you talk about coordinating the or centralizing the things like BlackBerries and cell phones, are there FTEs, are there people to be centralized as well? Are there IT people scattered throughout the city, or are they all under the IT department?
That's a very good question, because as the cities grow, and this I experienced this firsthand in my previous employer, there is a tendency to outsource. Reason being is you look to the departments for the subject matter experts. It really simplifies your overhead. It's impossible, and it's funny because I'll make fun of myself in this regard. I'm a behind-the-scenes person, a hardware person, absolutely. When it comes to using these gadgets, I'm terrible at it, and I'll be the first one to admit it. So you always have someone that has a niche in technology. There's a big assumption out there that, oh, you work in computers, you know everything about them. That's absolutely not true. There's a very distinct difference between infrastructure, back-end, help desk support, and application support. We're not in the process now, because of scope and the services that we provide, to lean on that and to depend on that. We will absolutely in the future, because we can't increase our staff to that capacity to be very good in that area. It's just impossible. So I will look to that. I will ultimately, right now everybody is within IT. As that moves forward, having worked in an area where it was completely decentralized and then turned around and tried to get back, there's some cultural challenges with that. I'm going to recommend that we manage it holistically and centrally as we go forward. So that will be that will probably be exposed in future years of our strategic plan to make sure that we manage that correctly.
Thank you. And the second question I have is, you were talking about when you go dark, there's no one other than you and some others maybe who
salaried people
take a pager home that answer questions and things for the police or the fire departments at night if they go to fire up their computer and it doesn't work.
Yeah, and the better we deploy our technology, hopefully we reduce those calls. We are trying to centralize and channel police public safety, I'll say, support through the help desk. Initially, when I arrived, it was a lot of personal calling. That clearly you can't establish performance measures when you do that, or dependencies. So we don't receive a lot of after-hours calls. One of the things that we did implement, and it goes back to the question that you just asked, is a security solution that allows, it's self-help, if you will. Passwords is probably about 80% of our calls. We've bought a solution now that incorporates all the passwords for all of our applications, and it has a website, so you can reset your password if you get locked out, so you don't have to place the call. Police Department's application suite just went live with that, I want to say, yesterday or Monday. So instead of having 5 different opportunities for a trouble ticket, we've consolidated that need and that identification, that credential down to 1, and we also have a website. If they do encounter a problem, they can help themselves. Kind of like you would if you're at home. Forgot my password. You ask a couple of security questions and you reset. Well, at least you didn't say you have a post-it on your monitor, because that's scary.
Yeah, that I don't. I appreciate your efforts. The hospital was all digital, and your efforts are monumental. Thank you.
Briefly describe your tiered backup system?
Sure.
And whether that's on-site or off-site?
It is actually on-site. Again, infrastructure is one of my strong suits, and I developed multiple backup solutions in a previous life, so I obviously brought that experience with me. In the intent to implement the foundation for disaster recovery plan, disaster preparedness, if you will, clearly you need a backup solution. That was a new solution that we added within the last year. We have, again, that infrastructure from traffic operations between our buildings. So instead of going off-site, we've actually selected two of our primary facilities. Our primary solution is to disk, to expedite the backup process from hours down to minutes. We have a 30-day retention period on that, and then that is archived off to tape, which is the second tier, which is located in this campus here. You're welcome.
How might you use cloud computing in the future to gain efficiency?
Oh, every way that I can.
And do the staff and other persons in the city understand that technology and how it may generate better efficiency?
I'll answer the first question first, obviously. I have a lot of, I'm very assertive, if you will, in technology, and I'm trying to push that envelope always, which is not characteristic of government agencies. Which is a sad thing. In terms of how you use cloud computing, there's certainly things that we can't do, right? We're restricted with police data. We can't put that out in a virtual environment somewhere and hope that it's protected and hope that we're meeting the legal mandate for data management. Probably not an option for us. Probably never will be an option for us. Email might be the same way. But we have some smaller applications and data sets that don't have to meet those requirements, and they're perfect candidates. Actually, I'm a proponent more of in-house virtualization to minimize your footprint, reduce your operational costs, and then keep it close to home. There's security issues with cloud that still haven't been refined, so I'm sure that over the next year or two, I'm sure it will become more prevalent. I don't know about government yet. I hope so. In terms of do staff internally understand these concepts? No, but I'm helping them, I hope. Thank you. You're welcome. There was another question.
Yeah, Rain Gray. I was just curious, you were talking about centralizing the IT for public safety, et cetera. Does that include under your MDTs or MCTs, radios, et cetera? Does that all fall underneath your office, in your budget?
I'm going to, the laptops and so forth, yes. Every aspect of public safety technology, with the exception of radios. The City of Goodyear's joined the consortium for, I guess, I think it's whatever you want to call it. It's Phoenix that's going to run this, or that consortium that will. PD's in there looking at me. We're not going to administer the radio solution. That will be managed predominantly by the City of Phoenix.
Will that come out of fire and PD's own budgets, or
Correct.
does that come under IT budget?
It will not be under our IT budget. In the future, I can't say for sure. I'm accustomed to radio technology being separate because it's more electronic based as opposed to computer based, if you will. So who knows what will happen in the future, though. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Thanks. I am surprised at the questions. Thank you. I didn't put you to sleep. Have a good evening.
Thank you. I think we have one more. Two more. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Attorney's Office and Clerk's Office. City Clerk first.
Hi, my name is Maureen Scott, and I'm the Deputy City Clerk. Lynn Mulhall, our City Clerk, is not able to be here tonight. Just a little bit about myself. I have a Master of Public Administration degree from Troy State University. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Textiles and Clothing from Colorado State University. I earned my Certified Municipal Clerk in just this last fall, And I'm also a certified elections officer with the Secretary of State's office. I've also attended the Arizona League of Cities and Towns elections training. The mission of the City Clerk's Department is to provide our community with multiple support services and awareness of the democratic process. Our vision is to be a highly professional, customer-focused model while striving to build strong relationships within our community. We have 6 staff members in our office. We have the city clerk, the deputy city clerk, an administrative assistant, a staff assistant, and then on the records side, we have the records administrator and a records analyst too. The first program service area I'm going to talk about is records management. We preserve all the permanent and vital records. We comply to federal and state laws and regulations. We comply to retention and disposition schedules that are supplied by the state. And we provide citywide training to all the records control officers that are in each city department. We maintain the city code, and we track the terms and contracts, the terms of contracts and agreements for retention and disposition purposes. And we legally process all records requests in a timely manner. We do work closely with legal, IT, and emergency management regarding disaster and recovery operations. Outputs for records management includes almost 8,000 pages were preserved, and that means were microfilmed. 1,100 documents of council and non-council items were processed. We processed 543 records requests and 30 city code changes. For revenue generator for records management, we charge 50 cents per page, and that's just basically to recoup the copying and printing. And then for commercial requests, we charge $38 per hour, and that's after the first 15 minutes plus copy fees. So for the fiscal year 08-09, we collected $3,700. The next program service area is managing the elections. We comply with all of the election laws, and we negotiate our contracts with the Maricopa County to run all of our elections. We also collect all the required documentation for potential candidates. If they're interested, we go over the packets with them. Once they become a candidate, then we have to collect all the documentation, and then we track all the campaign finance, and then we maintain the website. And the city departments we work closely with are legal, IT, and our webmaster. Outputs for managing elections includes we held our first all-mail ballot election in 2009, and we had a primary and also a general. We did have a runoff, and each of those elections cost $45,000. A cost of the traditional election, we had one in 2007, and that was $15,000. And as you can see from this slide, the voter turnout for the all-mail ballot was almost 30%, and as you can see from previous years, it's really gone up. The next program service area is mayor and council support. The open meeting law requires that agendas are posted at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting. We create the agendas, distribute them to council, and then we post them on the website. We process the draft minutes, and we make sure that they are posted on the website 72 hours after the council meeting. We set up for the council meetings here in the Justice Center, and we process all the follow-up from the council meetings and make sure all the paperwork is complete. And then we follow the open meeting laws for the 10 community facilities districts. And departments we work closely with are IT, of course, the court administrator, because they live stream all of our council meetings, departments issuing council actions, and a council action is the actual agenda items that go on the agenda. And then finance, legal, and city manager, they review all the council actions for the agenda. And of course, the mailroom, who prints our packets for us. Some of the outputs for mayor and council support include number of council actions. Those are the items that were on the agenda. For fiscal year 08-09, we processed 279. numbers of we processed 62 agendas and minutes, and 57 ordinances and 64 resolutions were processed. The next service area is boards and commission support. The 5 listed here, the city clerk's office actually produces the agendas and processes the minutes for those first 5. But we also support all the other city commissions and committees by making sure the agendas are posted and the minutes are posted in a timely manner under the open meeting law. And we work very closely with the staff liaisons for each of those committees so we can make sure we get that documentation. Some of the outputs for this, for the 5 that were listed on the previous slide, we processed 8 agendas and minutes. And for all of the other commissions and committees, we posted 38 agendas and minutes. The last area I'm going to talk about is administrative support. We process all legal advertising, off-track vetting, renewal paperwork, and we provide notary services. We also process special event applications, and they are routed to parks, code, streets, risk, police, and fire for review. We process the liquor license applications, and they are routed to code, streets, police, and fire for review. The legal advertising, off-track betting, and liquor license applications have legal requirements that we have to follow. Outputs in the administrative area include, we processed in fiscal year 08-09, 72 special event applications, 18 liquor license applications, 100 notary requests, and 152 legal ads were published. For revenue generator for administrative support, we collected $14,000 in liquor license fees for 08-09 and $750 in off-track betting. Some of the efficiencies in our office include staff is trained in both records and administrative side to handle any shifts in the workload. We use an efficient document management software tracking system called Laserfish, and that helps us locate documents easily. We have a process in place to meet all legal requirements for records requests, and we contract with the Maricopa County Elections Department to have smooth elections. We use the Agenda Manager software program to help create our council agenda packets. And as you can see, most of our processes are mandated by law, and we do have timelines that we have to abide by with that. And that concludes my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Marvin Fair, you didn't mention the term document imaging. Is that not used in the city?
Well, we use a Laserfish program, and what we do is we scan all our documents in, and it's called Laserfish. And that's what I was saying about the scanning and all that information where you can find people. Okay, thank you.
And legal, our final presentation.
Good evening. My name is Roy Massey. I'm the city attorney. The good news for everyone tonight is I am in-house. I am not working under the billable hours. If we were, I would be here for 2 hours.
That's important.
So we'll try to make this as painless as possible. Just a little bit background on myself. I've been with the city for since 2001, going on 9 years. I've been practicing law in the state of Arizona. This is my 15th, or going on my 15th year. I've been an Arizona resident since 1992. I grew up in the great state of Oklahoma. I think somebody else here, I think, went to my alma mater, University of Oklahoma. Right. There you go, right here. I knew there's another sooner out there. I grew up in a small town in southeastern Oklahoma by the name of Durant. Sometimes I've asked, what's the difference between rural southeastern Oklahoma and the city of Goodyear? Well, in Goodyear we have a state-of-the-art spring training ballpark with this great sculpture, the Ziz out front. In Durant, we have the world's largest peanut in front of ours. So, slight differences. And I've since found it's actually not the world's largest peanut. But I haven't told anybody. The Legal Services Department is the umbrella for all the legal services provided to the City of Goodyear. We actually have two divisions that do pretty separate and distinct functions for the city. The Civil Division, which is housed at City Hall, that's where I work. We practice civil law. We advise all the various city departments on all the legal matters that they have in the normal course of their duties. We also have the City Prosecutor's Office, which is the criminal component of our office. That's housed here in the court building, and they prosecute all cases that are prosecuted here in the municipal court. So we have a criminal division and a civil division, separate and distinct, and we practice very different areas of law, but that's all under the umbrella of legal services. Some of our principles that we adhere to in performing our duties. Org chart, there's 8 people in our office. We used to have 9 authorized positions. There is 3 civil attorneys in our office. There are 2 criminal attorneys, 2 criminal prosecutors. Last year in September, one of our assistant city prosecutors left to pursue other duties or other opportunities in the legal world, and for budgetary reasons, we froze that position. So currently, we have 8 people in our office. Mission statement: basically, be the best legal office a city could have. That's our short version, but that's our long version. The thing I like about municipal law is that we get to practice in so many different areas. As a city has many diverse departments and many diverse functions, we get, as municipal lawyers, get to practice in a whole lot of different areas of law, which is great. I'd hate to be in a law firm where I sat and looked at contracts for 10 hours a day, 5 days, or, well, the private law firm, 7 days a week, I suppose. But as a municipal lawyer, you never know what's going to walk through your door on any given day. I mean, one day you could be working on employment law issues, then you're moving right into land use issues, election laws issues. It keeps it interesting, and it keeps us sharp as we're always learning new areas of law in the civil division of the attorney's office. Oops. We were asked to kind of put together a program descriptor of what do you do. So the staff in our office came up with the acronym of DARES. It kind of outlines the 4 to 5 core service areas on the civil side. Summarizes a little bit of what we do. Documents, as you can imagine, as attorneys, that's what we do. You should see our office. They're just piled high with just numerous documents. I think John's seen it. It's horrible. We don't fish. We like paper. A lot of contracts, a lot of development agreements. We work with the Community Development Department with the developers when they come to the city, draft documents on how they're going to develop their various master plan communities. We work with economic development on their opportunities when they come to the city. As we all know, SunTech announced that they're going to locate in the city today. A great new opportunity for the city. I fully expect that economic development is probably going to be in our office tomorrow, so we can start laying the groundwork and how we're going to structure that deal and that agreement with that industry. So we're a support division. We support the frontline departments. They go out and they make the deal. They attract the business. Then they bring them over to meet the attorneys. So and then we develop the agreements that allow those companies to function here in the city and do business with the city. A lot of real estate documents. We draft the ordinances and the resolutions, or assist the departments in drafting the ordinances and the resolutions that govern the city. We do a lot of policies. We develop intergovernmental agreements with other various city and state agencies. Now we also we don't do a lot of litigation in-house, but to the extent we do litigation, we also obviously draft pleadings for court. Advice, we're the chief legal advisors for the city council, mayor, city council, and the various departments. I staff all the city council meetings. If you come to a city council meeting, I'm sitting over there next to John. So I'm there if the city council has questions during the course of conducting their business, make sure that we're following the proper procedures and proper laws, the open meeting law, etc. I act as the parliamentarian in city council meetings, make sure we're following the proper rules of order. We also, in our advisory role, we monitor new court decisions and monitor new laws. If you were at the council meeting last night, I briefed the council on a new court decision that just came down. So we try to keep the council, we try to keep the city departments informed of what's going on and what legal requirements are out there for the city and what's new. records. The city clerk is as she just talked about, is the major custodian of records in the city, but we work very closely with the clerk's department on public records requests. They'll get a public records request. Some of them are more detailed or more in-depth than others. Some we will gather the documents or look at the documents they've gathered, redact the ones that need to be redacted, disclose the ones that need to be disclosed, and withhold the ones that we're legally able to withhold for privacy reasons. We also work on litigation issues. When you have litigation, even if it's being handled by outside counsel, there's voluminous amounts of documents that have to be disclosed and traded between the various parties. We act as kind of the clearinghouse and gatherer of those documents and try to minimize some of our outside litigation costs by handling that aspect of litigation in-house. Employees and staffing, of course, we're a significant employer, and you also have employment-related issues that arise. And we work very closely with the Human Resources Department, advising their department, the HR department, and advising various city departments on employment-related issue. And from time to time, we need to conduct investigations on employment-related matters, and some of those are handled in the legal department. And we also manage outside investigations when they're needed from time to time. We handle work with the HR department on employee appeals hearings. We will represent departments on contested, merit board hearings. We will handle EEOC matters that come to the city. Some are handled in-house. Some are handled by outside attorneys. And we also provide litigation support on employment law-related matters when we have litigation on personnel matters, which does happen from time to time. Outputs. We track some things, documents. Obviously, we spend a lot of time looking at contracts. This is just a snapshot of what we track. It's a little misleading. You may see that we've had 45 documents in 1 month. I will tell you that, a good number of those may be standard day-to-day contract review. The IT department enters a contract with Microsoft. City attorney has to review and sign all contracts the city enters into. So we may spend 15 minutes looking at that document. Of course, in that same month, we also count as one document the development agreement we just spent a year and a half drafting. So they're all matters of documents, and we all track them in those individual categories. Claims, we work with Dean Kokenauer on claims. He handles most of the tort claims, but we also get other land use claims, employment-related claims. So those all come through the legal department as well. And lawsuits. Right now, I believe we have 9 open lawsuits with the city. Of course, Dean is handling the tort-related matters, but contract claims, employment claims, commercial-type claims, a lot of those are being managed within our department as well. So we track and monitor and direct that litigation on a daily basis. I don't know what I did here. On the other side of the office is the prosecutor's office. As I said, that's the criminal division of our office. Basically, if our police department goes out and makes an arrest and books somebody into jail, well, they're done. Somebody's got to take that matter and get it through the court system, and that's the prosecutor's office. So we pick up the case after the arrest or after the citation's issued, and we get that case through to a equitable solution in front of the municipal court. And again, PAVES is our acronym to kind of outline what the city prosecutor's office does. But we prosecute generally misdemeanor cases here in the municipal court. Misdemeanors are cases from a technical perspective where you could or can get less than a year in jail. But they're usually DUIs, domestic violence cases, thefts, shoplifting, all your criminal traffic cases. Those types of cases will come in front of the municipal court. All the felonies, your murders, your aggravated assaults, all that goes to the county attorney's office and is handled at the Superior Court downtown. So that's the differences between the types of criminal cases. We also practice victim advocacy. Victims in criminal cases in Arizona have constitutional rights to be notified of the status of the cases, to be consulted by the prosecution's office in the resolution of those cases, and just basically be kept and have input in those cases. So one of the components of our office, and particularly our support staff, is making sure that those victims' rights are protected during the course of the prosecution of criminal cases. So that's a component of their office. Education, our prosecutor's office engages in a lot of public outreach, a lot of training opportunities, whether that be through the training for the police department. Our prosecutor will go out and talk to schools. They'll work with the Citizens Academy. He'll put on classes at the Citizens Academy, talk a little bit about prosecution and criminal law and victims' rights in the community. So there is an educational component, particularly in our prosecutor's office. And service. Again, we want to make sure that witnesses and victims in criminal cases are all treated fairly and that their rights are respected during the course of criminal prosecution and case resolution here in the municipal court. There's statistically a little snapshot of what they've handled over the past 3 years. Talk about cost reductions implemented. We're in the same boat, obviously, as everyone else in the city. We're trying to minimize cost and achieve wherever possible. As we talked a little bit about, one of our prosecutors left last year in the fall, and we decided that we would freeze that position, distribute that prosecutor's work among our other 2 prosecutors. So far that's been successful with minimal impacts to other programs in that department. We had an opportunity in the last fiscal year to go get a federal grant, which was great for us, and we were able to use that grant to fund 2/3 of our prosecutors. So we've frozen one prosecutor position, and our second prosecutor position is being 2/3 funded by a federal grant at this time. So that's saved a significant amount of money. We also, as well as most departments, have gone through and reduced our baseline expenditures. Revenue enhancement, we are not really a revenue department. We are kind of a goalkeeper. We try not to let the revenues get away with court cases. So we're certainly always trying to look out for the city's best interest and protect our positions as best we can. But we do work with departments on some of their revenue-generating ideas. Again, we're a support department. We're there to help the departments achieve their goals. You know, can we do this? Is the question we usually get, and we'll say, is this legal? That's our answer. Say, well, yes, it is legal, and here's how we're going to do it, and we'll help you put together your agreements and your policies and procedures and programs, and make sure they're complying with the law. We developed a forfeiture department for the police department. That's currently in the works. I think the police chief would agree, and we're trying to figure out what to do with all this abandoned property in the property room. And there are opportunities to auction and get rid of that property in a legal manner that may, in fact, be a revenue generator for the police department. We just worked with the water department and helping them do a auction of their long-term water resource storage credits. That's kind of a paper product that's in the water resources department that does have a value on the open market, and they have an excess right now, so one of our attorneys has worked very closely with the water department to try to sell some of those excess water credits. And there is a market, and they're going to hopefully realize a significant revenue generator on that. We worked with the finance department in their collections programs in developing the documents that they send out and try to collect on delinquent accounts. No surprise, over the past couple of years, there's been a spike in bankruptcy filings, and that certainly affects the city as people are not able to pay their utility bills. So unfortunately, we're an unsecured creditor, so our opportunity to collect or what we're owed to the bankruptcy court is somewhat limited, but we've increased our monitoring of the bankruptcy filings, and we are filing claims when they appear to be collectible. So that's one thing that we are trying to do. Efficiencies, much like many other departments, we're limiting our training. As attorneys, we have obligations on a daily basis to get a certain amount of hours to maintain our licenses, but we're trying to do that through, I know I'm attending a seminar put on by a local law firm. It's free, and I get free CLE, so we're trying to maintain some of that and those opportunities to minimize costs. Our prosecuting attorneys are getting most of their hours through the Arizona Prosecuting Attorneys Advisory Councils at free or no cost. So they're getting most of their legal training through that state agency at this point. Knock on wood, the state won't sweep those funds, but we're certainly looking at those opportunities to reduce expenditures as well. And we're reducing the use of outside counsel when practicable. We're trying to bring more and more of the things that we used to use outside counsel for. We're trying to bring those in-house when we have the opportunity and the expertise to do so. So those are some of the things we've been looking at as things are getting difficult out there. But that's a little bit about what we do in the city attorney's office. Basically, anything a business needs an attorney for, anything a person needs an attorney for, a city needs an attorney for. So we're a resource. We work very closely basically with every department in the city. They love to see me walk in their office door. I get big smiles when the attorney comes by. I think John agreed. But again, we're a resource, we're a support division, and our major function is to make sure that the city is achieving its goals, and we're doing it in a legal manner. So with that, I would answer any questions you may have.
Brain Gray, one quick question about your grant-funded prosecutor. Is that a renewable grant, or is that going to go away?
We're going to knock on wood. That's what I know right now. We're working on it. We're hopeful. Anything else?
On the bankruptcies that you have filed,
yes,
where it's placed on a person's credit report, collection agency input on a credit report does fade away in time, but bankruptcies stay on for 7 to 10 years.
Right.
And so have you ever been able to collect on a bad debt because people want to clean up their credit?
I don't know that we have the length of time to really know that yet. I mean, we've really worked with finance over the past probably 12 to 18 months to really ramp up the collections efforts. And so those delinquencies, I don't think we've really gotten to the point where we're going to know that yet. I mean, we've brought the collections agency on board. You've seen the dollars that they're starting to generate, but long term, I think it's too early to tell.
Well, I think you might find success with that, since I worked a lot of years in credit, where people, after 4 or 5 years want to get their credit cleaned up so they can buy a house or do something. Can't do it if they've got a thing on there from the city. So it works.
Thank you for your time.
That's it. Last presentation. When we get together next, it'll be with the operating departments. So now we have some time. I'd like to pass it on to this. I held up a little bit because we might have time to sign in. Some of the things that, let's make sure I haven't missed anything in the questions that you posed that still need to be responded to. You certainly set your intention for a 15-minute presentation. Can I assume that's 16 minutes? Is that all right?
Wait, I think we should vote.
And also, question about the more detail on the rainy day fund, and we're going to post that presentation that was made. It sounded like it would be helpful to you. And anything else that Larry wants to put on there? The investment income drop, the significant drop, a little more explanation about what the details were of that. The question came up, I believe, over here of what's possibilities going forward with utility billings and what did you save on it, and even if what would be the likelihood of being able to bill prospectively, if that's the right term. The question of the 30% increase in the budgetary funds for finance, a little more detail on that between 06 and 09. The question that was raised over here about 24,000 letters sent out, $22,000 collected. I think there's a major number missing in the middle. What is it that came from the first collection process, and then so we'll get you the detail on that. Mobile connection policy, mobile communication policy. So you can see what this policy is, and if we have one on tech usage, we'll also put that on so you can see the stuff that related to that presentation. So we also have some time to discuss any other items that you want. Very little time, but any other items that you want. I assure you that future meetings will not have this much data. We wanted to get all of general government together. It was a long night presentation, which had a lot of good questions. As we get into the operating departments, it'll be a much shorter presentation component, a much longer deliberation conversation component. So are there any things that you would like to discuss tonight, or anything we need to resolve that we haven't resolved? You did the vote on the on the discussion. How about any other committee processes that you want to talk about, or questions about the committee itself, or how it governs itself, how you govern yourself, that you want to discuss?
I have one, Joan Shield. I would like to have an opportunity for our committee to discuss what our outcome is going to be. We have our time limit. We're really restricted. And my understanding that once a month that our meeting room is allocated to someone else. So really we only have 3 meetings a month, right, instead of 4. So we have, I counted up how many weeks we had until the end that we were, so it's, I don't know. Now I can't remember if it was like about 7 or so meetings.
5 or 6 remaining. But I think one thing that's possible, Joan, would be to do this in a different location on that off week. I think one of the reasons we didn't do it last week was we had a whole lot of stuff, and people were going to digest it and get into it and increase their comfort level with that. So I think the possibility exists that we could have that off meeting, the one that third, that once a month, simply in a different location. I beg your pardon?
This room is where we record sessions.
Right. Right. So the one thing you would sacrifice is the recordation in the broadcasting, but still you would meet and gain the same value from the meeting per se.
Videos are very important. I go back and watch them.
Well, it's to be kind of, that's the unfortunate reality, is that becomes kind of a trade-off, I suppose. Yes, sir.
It's not a question for the group or for you to follow up on or anybody to follow up on, but from just kind of an overview standpoint, to me, the issue with the departmental expenses and the, I guess what you call next week is the operating group expenses.
Yes, sir.
Is it, we've got a revenue situation that's somewhere between 2006 and 2007. Right. So I think it's really, at some point, we have come to a conclusion. It's up to the city manager to decide whether or not he thinks he ought to run the city at 2006, 2007 expenditure levels, and whether or not he can do that. If there are a lot of things that have happened since 2006, 2007 that cause us, regulations have changed, right, cost of living has gone up, all those kinds of things that don't allow you to get to that. Some of the questions I asked, the departments were saying, well, I do this much more stuff, and this other thing went away. So there's other groups out there who apparently have had responsibilities decreased because they've gone to other places. So again, unless the city is willing to go look at those types of things, I don't see that you get that much out of staff evaluations like this beyond probably what you've reduced so far. Because, someone has to say, okay, the head count was, I'll make it up, 396 in the middle of 2006, and now it's 551. So let's start in middle of 2006, and whose departments changed by how much? And how much other stuff did you take away from other departments so that there can be a debate or a discussion amongst the groups to say, well, look, I do this much more work, I do that much less.
Right, sure.
But I don't know that this group can make that happen. But without that kind of analysis, how do you decide whether finance needs to fire more people or whether the fire department needs to fire more people?
Well, I think one of the and you asked the question tonight, and particularly in finance, what's been added since 06?
Yeah, I didn't mean to pick on them. In fact, from their, what I see in their numbers is not
right,
significant increases based on what they've said, the additional work that they've acquired.
Yes. Well, I think it's a reasonable question to ask the departments that will report to you or give you an overview to talk about what's changed within their arena, talk about what's been added, whether it's a relationship.
That's also subjective, right? I had this many employees in Parks and Rec in 2006. Now I've got this many. How many more things do I have to do from 06 till now, or how many less things do I need to do? Or does the revenues of Goodyear really not relate to how many things Parks and Rec has to do? I don't know the answers to those. Well, without that kind of analysis, it's subjective. I really expected every person to get up here tonight and say, my department's spending way too much money and I can take a whole lot of stuff out. I was really disappointed that nobody did that. I'm sure we all thought that was going to happen, right? no one thinks they're not doing a great job. So without some kind of data-driven analysis like that, it's all subjective.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting is data. I think some of the measures, the data-based measures, include population increase in the relationship of population increase to certain services delivered. Not all, but there's a direct relationship, let's say, between population increase and refuse collection.
Well, Larry publishes almost 3 pages of measures in his
Sure.
CAFR every year.
So I think that it's reasonable, and it's a reasonable request to ask departments to be objective in sharing that kind of information.
I think at some point it's also equally important to talk about generating revenue.
Absolutely, and that's one of the requests that's been placed on you, and that's one of the things that will be a topic for an evening, is revenue generation, user fees, parks fees, so on and so forth, opportunities.
Is our community survey back yet?
Is the community survey back?
I'm sorry, yes, some Paula said it was back. I don't know when it will be available, probably within the next week. I'll find out.
And I remember her commitment being that as soon as they could put it together, you would get a copy of it and the questions that were associated with it. So we'll follow up on that.
Or to make suggestions of how I'd like to see it analyzed a little bit differently if it's not analyzed the way that I find helpful.
Well, I think we'll certainly check into that. I think probably you will get some of the raw data if you want. It tends to come with the conclusion. Then the opportunity to deal with that as you might.
The one last thing I just want to mention is, and I don't know when we're going to get to the discussion, or if we are to get to the discussion, but to me, the 800-pound gorilla is we have in Goodyear today what appear to be 2 significantly underperforming capital assets in the ballpark stadium and in the McDowell Road thing. And until we understand, I mean, those are multiples of times more money than anything we talked about today or would talk about tomorrow. And you know, without that kind of evaluation of what can be done about those, you know, that's to me, that's where there might be when you talk about revenues particularly, that's where there's revenue.
Is there any specific data that you might want that'll help that conversation? Let's say we put that on an agenda for a specific discussion.
I'd asked you about getting a copy of the justification for the ballpark, for example, when it was approved, to say, okay, what were the tax revenues that were expected, what were the operating expenses that were expected, so we could compare how it's. And I understand that, you know, last year was an incomplete year, but as we look forward to 2011, where we see these dire prospects being forecast, have we really cranked in what we expect the stadium to start to contribute when it's been almost $6 million cash drain on the city in this past year?
Okay. Well, we haven't lost that question either, and the data will come to you. But maybe there's some. Would you like to see us frame a discussion about the stadium, folks, without going into voting? This is just kind of what would you like to see that would help you understand the complexity and some of the details of the issues faced? Is that something you'd like to see us spend time on? I generally see heads nodding. Is anybody opposed to that?
Revenues, expenditures. Yeah.
Related to the stadium. And I think what Howard's also saying is some of the basic assumptions that we made, you know, and how are they playing out and what do we see for the future. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, and when I looked at this data, I just looked for what were the big things that are off. Okay, and the stadium and the McDowell Road thing are, you know, multiples of off, apparently, from any of these departmental discussions, with the exception of police and fire, which have you know, next week I guess we're going to talk about them.
Have I missed a general outline of what this committee is doing each week from now to the end?
Oh, well, we had a schedule that today that we were going to have police and fire. We're going to have public safety tonight, but we switched that. And we have 2 or 3 each week going out for the next few weeks. I don't have it right in front of me. Do you have that schedule? Pardon me?
It's on the website. I guess I'm thinking in terms of those outcomes that were discussed. Do we have kind of an idea about there's going to be so many presentations?
Yes.
This night we're in
to discuss this, and on this night
Absolutely.
this, and then come up with something by here or by here?
Oh, yes.
What
We
kind-
discussed that all on the first night.
And I was here, but I guess what I'm looking for is that visual again about
Right.
what do you expect from us by what time, so that we can kind of gauge our discussions around being productive.
Absolutely, and it's on the website. So, but I can't access that myself with my
Well, I'll go
computer
back
here.
and look at my stuff. My memory may be running a little
But
short.
it takes us through about 6 weeks, and then the way we had discussed it initially, and again, this is your call. You can meet more frequently, you can meet less frequently, but we thought that would get us through in the next, I think, 3 weeks, all the departments. That would give you an opportunity to have a week to deliberate and converse about it and kick things around and share ideas, and to do your individual commentary, your suggestions, your recommendations for what might be done on the cost side and what might be done on the revenue side. Those would all be turned in individually and then collected into a single report that would come back to you the following week as a report with the way I envision it, but this can be gone, again, any way you want it, to have a report that you would look at and determine whether you felt it represented both you individually and you collectively. And all of the individual commentaries would be attached with name removed, so that there would be no missing anybody's comment about anything, but it would be without specific reference to the individual. But you'd know yours, and you'd know whether you were well represented or not represented. But also the attempt to gather it all together into some sort of apparent weighted statement about what your viewpoint was collectively, even though it's voted and made independently and individually. Yes.
John Shield, what I was wondering is when the mayor spoke, he said, well, while March was a tentative deadline, it could be extended. And I'm wondering if we wouldn't be wise to do some extensions, take on one department, one thing at a time, work through that, then go to another one, or divide up in groups, or do something. That, because it just looks like a huge elephant out there we're trying to fight off. We're getting little segments all the time, and it's hard to really, center in and really accomplish something on one project or another.
Well, keep in mind that each one of these is a total department. So what you're getting is the entirety of a department in detail that's only limited by the number of questions you want to ask to follow on. But if you want to, as a group, suggest to the council that you have another couple meetings. I mean, there is obviously a deadline from a budgetary standpoint for when things must go forward. Well, it's certainly way before that, because you can't wait until June. It's way before that. But I think what we intended was to try to get this wrapped up early in March. But that doesn't mean you can't ask to spend more time on it. It doesn't mean you can't ask to meet more frequently. This is your committee, how much you want to put into it, and you've put a lot into it already. And so has the staff, by the way. I mean, they got all this other stuff to do too, but they put a ton of time into trying to bring something forward that is an honest representation of the work they do. Yes, sir.
I'd like to add a comment to what Howard mentioned earlier about the drain on city revenues.
Yes.
Could we add the area south of us in Mobile to that list?
In what regard? In the cost of service delivery to that geographic area? Okay. Yes. And what you would like to understand is how much do we dedicate to that area in the whole variety of services? Okay. Yes, sir?
One other thing that I was interested in is the revenue and the expense impact of, we've talked about a community center and I guess that central university setting that they were talking about. I haven't heard much about it lately, and is it part of next year's fiscal plan, or?
I don't know, but let us
hear more about that.
Let us get that information, and in each one of these cases, we'll post something to your website, as well as prepare to have a discussion in here in more detail. But we'll certainly follow up on that, sir. And can't give you an answer now. Next time we meet, a week from today, if you have anything that you'd want to make sure we discuss or that you want us to put on the website, would you let me know, please? We're turning it around much more quickly. And again, I personally apologize in the interest of trying to do it more thoroughly. We just took too long to get that first batch of data there. So we'll fine now. Is there anything, folks, that we've missed that you'd like to make sure you comment on tonight? Well, thank you very much. Have a pleasant week. And thank you to staff. Thank you, folks.